This audio presentation of your silent partner, Cosmic Consciousness, Part 2 by Murdo, MacDonald, Bayne is brought to you by AudioEnlightenment.com. Copyright 2013, all rights reserved. Chapter 1, Whatsoever you ask in my name. In our last lecture we gained knowledge of great importance to us in our daily living, the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, and the realization of the tree of life. We saw clearly that the tree of life was real, while the tree of knowledge of good and evil was speculative. That is, what we thought about things, and according to understanding, so did this good and evil affect us. If we were entirely unaware of the tree of life, the source of all things, when we were entirely lost in the tree of knowledge of good and evil, thereby eating of its fruit which was forbidden, lest we die in our sin, our ignorance. The tree of knowledge of good and evil we saw clearly was the intellect of man. There was nothing wrong with this tree, except we were bidden not to eat of its fruit. If we did, this would be the cause of all our trouble, and we would die in that trouble, the ignorance of not being aware of the tree of life, the true source of things. We were shown clearly what was meant by the allegory of Adam and Eve. Eve was the soul and Adam the body, yet the tree of life was the creator of both. This tree of life is represented as the Christ, I am the life, which explains the Trinity of man, spirit, soul, and body. And unless we get a true understanding of their value to one another, we will get lost in all the various cults, including religion, metaphysics, psychology, and the many other things that man tries to free himself by, but fails miserably because he has not yet grasped the great truth about himself, made in his image and likeness. We also saw that the soul was a thinking entity, and what the soul thought or believed, so was this outpictured in the body or circumstance. Thus mankind was in conflict, in a continuous conflict and confusion in regard to good and evil. If his experiences were pleasant, he would say this was good, and if his experiences were the reverse, he would say this was evil. And because he did not know that he was the creator of both, he suffered through his reaction to his experience. So he feared one and clung to the other, but what he feared came upon him, so he ate of the fruit because of his ignorance. We also saw that the great truth concerning man was that he was made in the image and likeness of God, having dominion over everything. Now the point that has not dawned upon most of us is that God is the creator of all things, so he must have dominion over all that he creates, and the only power man has is this creative power invested in him. To be omnipotent must of necessity have all power centered in that omnipotence. Neither is omnipotence ever by itself, but it is joined in the expression of the omniscience, the all-knowing. And it is this knowing that is seen in all creation, the how of everything. And as man was not aware of his knowing that knows all, he was lost in his illusion of his fear of the unknown. But what man creates in fear is just as real to him as what he creates in faith. So we see the law of our creative being is, whatever the consciousness is aware of, the intelligence will bring forth. And according to the intensity of the emotion attached to the idea, so is it outpictured in the body and circumstance. 2. As man was ignorant of this truth, this ignorance was his fall. By his own creative power he creates self-imposed conditions from which he suffers because he fears this evil which he himself creates. His intellect had not yet grown up through reason to recognize that there cannot be two opposing powers antagonistic to each other with equal power. This stupid concept can only arise in the mind that has not yet grasped the significance of the tree of life. There is always an inner and an outer, but both are one. Mind and matter are not different things. Matter is mind in action, mind materialized, and mind and matter are complementary to each other. What affects mind affects matter, and what affects matter affects mind, and this is our reaction. Pure thought and reaction are two different things. Reaction is our response to effects, and pure thought is thinking from cause. With this understanding, we realize that our liberty resides in the creative power of our thought. We shall see the immense importance of recognizing the essence of things as distinguished from the effects caused from the misplaced order, which we often first become acquainted with. If we let our thoughts dwell upon an inverted order, we perpetuate that order. But if we go below the surface and then recognize the cause of this misplaced order and fix our thought on the essential of things, and see that it is logically impossible for anything to be essentially bad, which is a specific expression of the universal good, we will then in our thought call things good. We will no longer perpetuate the inverted order of things, but will help to bring about joy and liberty in its place. The Master's teaching and work show the natural outcome of his perfect recognition of the divine principles within himself. The recognition of these principles in us will bring about precisely what the Master himself predicted. He enumerated the signs which would follow those who readily believed and acted on what he really taught. He made it plain to all that he was simply making a statement of cause and effect. He never set up his power as a proof of the nature different from our own. On the contrary, he said that those who learned what he taught would eventually be able to do still greater things. The disciple, when he is perfected, shall be as his master. The Master laid special stress on the perfect naturalness of all that he taught. When we realize what is accomplished by the Master, we see what is potential in ourselves. And as we have reached the point where any further evolution can only result from our conscious cooperation with the principles inherent in all creation, we realize that our future progress depends on the potentialities of those divine principles contained in our own individuality and the use of them in our daily lives. It is impossible to separate the Father from ourselves, and when we see this is an impossibility, we see that we have immediate contact with the Father. By accepting this divine ideal as our own, we realize the truth which the Master taught, that the Father has individualized himself in us, and this individualization is capable of recognizing itself. It is the Spirit of the Father in me who doeth the work, and this leads us to number 3. Number 3. When a man at last comes to the perfect understanding of the truth of his oneness with life, this understanding is his rising again. With this understanding, it is evident to all who recognize it that we must become aware of our individualization as the tree of life. And when the truth of being becomes a conscious reality, then we are able to do as we are instructed to do, to overcome and master all things. If ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible to you. Matthew 17:20. As we focus our attention upon faith and take into conscious consideration, it appears to have a very inconsistent nature. We find that the state of mind varies with different people and under different circumstances. It moves in natural sequences determined and affected by the kind of understanding which appears on the plane of consciousness, and this determines the degree and quality of faith. It shall be done unto you. If your faith depends upon a platitude of belief, then, according to your belief, so shall it be unto you. But if you have grasped the mighty truth as the Masters do, you place yourself beyond the destructive attacks of doubt, worry, fear, and apprehension. This places you in a position to operate according to the natural tendency of the law to fulfill its promise of satisfactorily producing, Whatsoever you ask in my name, it shall be done unto you. In order to thoroughly understand the relationship of faith to the omnipotent omniscience, we must see that there is no separation between us and the Father, and that we possess the Father's gift and nothing can be accomplished without him. The weakness in most people is that they do not take this great truth into consideration, and if they did, they fear they might be considered foolish. But this is the height of ignorance, caused by eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, otherwise the intellect. The intellectual, you will notice, is one who is mostly devoid of wisdom. He is self-opinionated in his own ignorance. A little reflection will reveal this fact. The more one is steeped in the arrogance of intellectual nonsense, the more difficult it is to overcome this self-imposed stupidity, because of the law of being, and not until one becomes humble can the light of truth dawn upon the mind. We must accept the truth that the superior consciousness of our mind, the Father, understands all that our personal consciousness is trying to do and transcends our personal consciousness in all things. It allows us to have the benefits of its supreme consciousness, provided we collaborate with it wisely, and do not forget our true relationship as revealed by the Master. I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, and me in you. The only requirement of the creative mind is that we include it in all our plans and schemes, even though its activities are unseen and become known to us only through their results, one step at a time. When each step becomes for us a new experience added to the sum total of all our accumulated experiences, we are content to allow the law of growth to take effect. But if we become anxious and fearful, we violate the law of growth, and this hinders its progress. When a seed is placed in the ground, you do not continually take it up to see if it is growing. You allow the natural law of growth to take effect. It is the same with the universal law, even though each step, in the first instance, is the personal mind a blind operation. Nevertheless, the employment of this understanding is the method whereby we may consciously increase our knowledge of the power invested in us, in the light of the fact that we are made in His image and likeness. The Creator has ordained that we will make Himself known through our desires. Therefore, we are born with an unquenchable thirst for achievement. We are endowed with the ability to unite ourselves consciously with the Creator, making it possible that whatever we are aware of, the intelligence will produce in other familiar words. Whatsoever ye ask in my name, believing, the same shall be done unto you. This is God's gift to man, but unless man knows his relationship to God, he is liable to err. And by the law inherent in himself, he reverses the process. It is God's will that man is equipped with faculties in order that he may partake of the fruits of the divine feast. We must learn to employ these faculties wisely, and thus, with the will of God, intelligently play our part in His predetermined scheme of creation, consciously cooperating with the creative power, and thereby successfully fulfilling our own spiritual and material needs. Our desire, then, should be that God's scheme of creation should work through us individually, and to do this efficiently and effectively, we must continue to employ the faculties God has given us. So we learn through doing, and to be happy in your doing is the key to further advancement. So we have to be both passive and active, passive when we depend upon the all-pervading intelligence, and active to keep on keeping on. Refusing to turn away or give up, or to be dominated by fear, worry, or apprehension. To see the creative principle acting freely, uniting with our free will, in bringing from the unseen to the seen, is thus providing that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Hebrews 11:1. Now because there are varying degrees of faith, there are different degrees of understanding and consequently corresponding degrees of success and failure. The natural tendency of the personal mind is to reduce all new ideas to the terms of its own past experiences, with the result that by our past experiences we argue the possibility or the impossibility of accomplishing the new idea. This deprives us of the use of the creative law. Consequently, we appreciate the need for greater wisdom and understanding. Whosoever of you is defective in wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all men without question or reproach, and the gift will be his. Only let him ask in faith, with never a doubt, for a doubtful man is like the surge on the sea, whirled and swayed by the wind. That man need not imagine he will get anything from the Lord, double-minded creatures that he is, wavering at every turn. James 1:5, 6, 7, and 8. Now you can see that the tree of life is your salvation. This is the spring of living water that rises up to eternal life and the only creative power in man. The Eternal shepherds me, I lack for nothing. He makes me lie in meadows green. He leads me to refreshing streams. He revives life in me. He guides me by true path, as He Himself is true. My road may run through a glen of gloom, but I fear no harm. For Thou art beside me. Thy club, Thy staff, they give me courage. Thou art my host, spreading a feast for me, while my foes have to look on. Thou hast poured oil upon my head, my cup is brimming over. Yes, and all through my life, goodness and kindness wait upon me. The Eternal is guest within His household evermore. So mote it be. End of lesson. Chapter 2, The Golden Thread. In this lecture I could not do better than give some idea of the general scope of the Master's teaching, showing the force which pertains to them. Now it must be remembered that Jesus was teaching a definite system, not a creed nor a ritual, nor a code of speculative ethics, but a definite system of spiritual inspiration, logical reasoning, and experience in the mode of action in which the universal principles find expression through the human mind. His system, therefore, combines the science of truth with inspirational philosophy. The great point that he taught was the absolute liberty of the individual. The first fact is that the perfect liberty of the individual must be in accordance with the will of the Creator, and the second fact is that this freedom is to obtain simply as a result of coming to know the truth, and to know that this liberty and truth exist at this moment. And what keeps us from enjoying it is simply our ignorance of this fact, and this means that the ever-present law in each individual is absolute liberty, and it is only our beliefs to the contrary that keeps us in bondage to all sorts of limitations. In our experiences of the past, we fear the present and the future, and if we cling to the narrowing influences of our experiences, we will remain ignorant of any other possibilities. And it is the feeling of being tied to these experiences that we want to get loose from, and the Master came to tell us that when we realized what he taught, we would find that we were not tied up at all. Now the great truth that we must see and realize, not as a mental concept but as a living reality, is that the divine mind makes things by itself, becoming them. Then it follows that it must become the individual, and it cannot be any other than its own natural expression in the individual. And through the individual, the divine is pressing forward into fuller and fuller expression of itself, and therefore becomes fuller and fuller in the life of the individual that realizes it. And anything that limits the expression of the divine nature in the individual must be also retarding progress to the individual, and this can only come from the individual who is ignorant of this truth that sets you free. The question that rises in the mind of many is, how can this be acquired? The way is so simple that it baffles most, and that way is that we have only to realize it. Now some will exclaim that this is beyond their comprehension, and if they did comprehend it, it was far beyond the quality of faith that they have. Yet after it is all through this understanding that our faith grows, and when you begin to think, you will see that it is the only way that you will have ever accomplished anything. We take all the operations of the life principle working through our physical organism for granted, and what is wanted is a similar confidence in the working of our divine faculties. We trust the functions of our body because we assume this to be the working of the natural law, and when we begin to learn the truth as the Master taught it, we will use our inherent powers by assuming them to be as natural as any other. Jesus taught in the parables because it was almost impossible to unveil the truth to the masses, but he taught his disciples the inner working of the law. Yet he also told them the real significance of what he taught to them would be revealed by the Spirit of truth in themselves. And the time would come when the inner meaning of his words would dawn upon them, and so it was with us. When the great meaning dawns upon us, we see that his proverbs tell us plainly of the Father, and our only wonder is that we did not discern his true meaning long ago. He revealed to us the great truth of the universal principles being reproduced everywhere, and especially in ourselves. He revealed the law that was inherent in ourselves. He did not lay down rules and regulations, although he could if he wanted to, but there was something greater and more magnificent, which he knew and therefore wanted all humanity to share in this magnificent truth that he himself knew so well. The golden thread upon which the Master's pearls are strung is that perfect liberty is the natural result of knowing the truth of your own being. And when the truth is found, you will see that you are perfectly free, irrespective of conditions and circumstances which you may experience. But the trouble with most people is that they cling to this experience and disregard the truth of their being. This final discovery cannot be made for us. We must find it ourselves. Therefore, he that hath ears to hear, let him hear. This is nowhere brought to our minds more clearly than in the parable of the prodigal son. The fact of sonship had never altered for either of the two brothers, but in different ways they each missed the true position as sons. The one limited himself by separating off a particular share of the Father's goods for himself, and because he accepted his portion as a limited share instead of the whole, his share was speedily exhausted, leaving him in misery and want. The other brother equally limited himself by supposing that he had no power to draw upon his father's stores, but must in some way wait until some specific occasion arose so that he may ask permission to do so, not realizing that it was his inherent right to partake of all that he needed, and it was the Father's privilege to give. All that is mine is thine. The younger son took up a false idea of independence, thinking that he could do well on his own, while the other, although staying in the Father's house, believed himself to have no independence at all. The younger son finds that his dependence on his own resource fails him miserably, so he returns to find that he still has a position of honor, and he is capable of receiving all in his Father's house. The elder son is rebuked by the simple words, "Why wait for me to give you what is yours already? All that is mine is thine." You will see that it is impossible to make a more clear statement of the relation between the universal and the individual mind. Both are so interlocked together and are impossible of separation. The individual acting on the universal can draw whatever the individual requires, but before this can be done, this relationship must be realized, and this is a law that Jesus taught. So we see in this parable of the prodigal son the two errors which prevent us from understanding and utilizing this relationship. The younger son is one who, not realizing his own spiritual nature, lives in the resources of his own intellect, which leads him astray, as we saw in our last lecture, in the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He was not aware of the source of his being as the tree of life, so we see the same story in every parable the Master spoke. It was only when the son failed to meet his needs that he was driven to find something that could not be exhausted, and eventually he comes to the recognition of his own spiritual being. This was the birthright given to him by his father, therefore he could take more than he could ever use from the inexhaustible supply in the Father's house. He was the Son, made in his Father's image and likeness with dominion over all things, and could not have been created otherwise. The Son was a direct expression of the Father, this unerring universal mind, and the only way the Father could express himself is through the Son's awareness of the Father united in himself, and that whatever the Son asked, the Father would produce. But this law of recognition has to be applied before the process could take place. What man is there of you whom, if his son asks bread, will give him a serpent? If ye then, being ignorant, know how to give good things unto your children, how much more shall your Father, which is in heaven, give good things to them that ask him? Gradually, as we become more and more aware consciously of our inseparableness from our Father, he advances to meet us as he did the younger son, and at last we find we are folded in the Father's arms. Then we realize the full import of the Master's word as he clasped his son in his bosom and kissed him, meaning in other words, I and the Father are one. Then we learn that perfect liberty is in union and not in separation. Thus identifying ourselves with the infinite, we find that all that is God is ours. This attitude, when not only adopted but understood, gives us this truth that sets us free, as the Master stated. Now we can see clearly the simple fact that the only possible action of the universal mind or life principle must be to always press upon us a fuller and fuller expression of itself in strict accordance with the conditions which each individual provides for its manifestation. When we grasp thoroughly the principle of the universal mind, undisturbed in its differentiation, expressing itself through the form prepared for that purpose, and when that special form is ourself created with the means for that expression, then the more we realize it, the greater will expression be. When we realize that the foundation of this expression rests in a harmonious state of mind, we can easily grasp the condition we have to sustain, so that this great power may manifest in and through us. The emotions of fear, anger, jealousy, possessiveness, anxiety, all these and more must be rooted out of our minds through getting near and near to that which is harmony itself. Therefore, as we begin to discern these conditions within ourselves, we do not struggle with them, but quietly see that they can have no part in the scheme of things. As we get some insight into the boundless possibility which must result from this, we will realize before all things the necessity of seeking to reproduce in the individuality that harmonious order which is the foundation of the universal system. When we begin to express from moment to moment through our doing, we are uniting with that power which is expressing itself through us moment by moment as much as we are capable of receiving. Also, when we realize that the source from whence we draw is impersonal in nature, we can use it for any purpose for our immediate needs. But we can only do this by abiding in the Father's house and by conforming to the rule of the house, which is the law of love. Jesus made this plain in his parable of the prodigal son. There could not be any envy or jealousy in the Father's house, and in that house all were merry, and all feasted at the Father's table, loving one another. This is the only restriction, if it can be called a restriction, to prevent us from injuring ourselves. When we consider that love is the very thing that puts us in possession of this limitless power of drawing from the infinite source, which is love itself. Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemies. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good unto them which despisefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. The binding power of universal love is seen to be inherent in the very nature of the liberty of life, which we attain by the knowledge of the truth, but except this, there is no other restriction. Why? Because we are employing the Spirit which is first cause, and our creative power and thought is the individual action of the same Spirit which is universal in action and is both cause and being of every mode of manifestation. And the great fact that distinguishes first cause from secondary causation is its entire independence of all conditions, because it is not the outcome of conditions, but itself creates them. It produces its own conditions step by step. Therefore, if the law of love be taken as a foundation, any line of action can be worked out successfully and profitably. So as our understanding grows, so will the law of love grow in exact correspondence. For in this companionship with the Father, we get back to the source of our own spiritual nature. So we find ourselves in possession of boundless possibilities without any fear of misusing them, because we do not seek to be possessors of the divine power without being possessors of divine love and wisdom also. As we are all children of the same family, we only recognize the one Father-Mother. We are no longer limited by creeds, orthodoxies, and all sorts of conditions we impose upon ourselves when we are met with these words, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. And as soon as we become sufficiently enlightened, as the elder brother was, that there is no restriction except the law of love, we also enter the house now, no longer a servant, but as a son, and we join in the festival of everlasting joy. This is the teaching of the great teacher of teachers who left us a legacy impossible to estimate. Its value, as we realize it, becomes greater and greater and never dies. Now listen to me, children. Listen to instruction and get wisdom. Do not refuse my counsel. For happy are they who hold to me. Happy the man who listens to me daily at the gate of the watch, waiting at my doorway. He who finds me finds life. Proverbs 8:32-35. So mote it be. End of lesson. Chapter 3, The Divine Marriage. I doubt if there is a person in the world today who would not like to have the power and practical application of the creative principle that the Master had. Yet this is possible if we will put into operation the teaching of the Master, for he himself said, in other words, He who will practice what I teach will do greater things. Now the only use anything can do to anyone is to be able to use it. Theorizing gets us nowhere. It is the practical application that counts. It is all very well for one to have theoretical knowledge, but this can only be a basis for practice. And if you will look into your own minds, you will see that the only thing of real value in your life was when you did something well. The secret behind all growth is to do things well, and the greatest results we can hope to have is when we can use the creative power in a practical way. Or maybe put it another way, we have to make ourselves better channels for the fuller and fuller expression of the creative power which is working through us. It is not important how much intellectual knowledge we have if we do not understand the laws of the creative power. We will not accomplish very much that is of real value to our fellows. I have known many who, although they have university degrees, are miserable failures. I have also known many people without much education make a success of their lives. And I have known those who have had wisdom and understanding make a more brilliant success of their lives. Success is not measured in terms of what we can acquire for ourselves, but how much we can do for others, and this leads us to the practical application of the creative power. If you have any theories and you cannot put them into practice, it is better to leave them alone, for you are wasting valuable time. By using the power and opportunities you have now, it will naturally open up avenues for still further opportunities, and the higher development of your power becomes possible. As the higher development of your power increases, so will the way be opened upon for further advancement and expansion. When you begin to experience this practical application, you will realize that there is no limit to your progress other than denying or doubting the principle of growth in yourself. In my last lecture, I showed you the parable of the prodigal son. The younger son thought that he could depend upon himself, so he left the father's house. But he found that he could not exist on his own resources, so he returned to the father's house, where there was an inexhaustible supply. The other son we saw felt that he had no independence of his own, and it was on special occasions only when he sought to draw upon the father's stores. He was also shown that he was also a son, having the right to draw at all times from the father's inexhaustible supply. Thou art ever with me, and all that is mine is thine. When the Master spoke, he spoke from the Spirit, the Father within. That is why his words contain so much power and action, and we are compelled to take notice. In John 15 we read in verse 4, Remain in me, as I remain in you. Just as a branch cannot bear fruit by itself without remaining on the vine, neither can you unless you remain in me. By the employment of your faculties and opportunities as far as you can realize them, and by the same law, by abiding in the Father, is certain to produce its own reward. By becoming faithful over a few things, you shall become ruler of many things. So as each day comes, so shall you enter into a fuller and fuller expression of the creative power that is within you. And by virtue of your perfect liberty, so do you have access to all the resources of the universal mind, whether it be within you or around you. Our faculties are represented as talents by the Master when he spoke the parable in Matthew 25. This parable is a long one, but when we see its meaning, it is clear to us that we must use our gifts of the creative principle, so that by doing so we shall multiply what has been given to us. The parable is very plain in its detail. When the 3 servants were handed, one 1,200 pounds, another 500 pounds, and the other 250 pounds, each according to his capacity. The first and second servants went and traded with what was handed to him, and made as much again. But the third went away and dug a hole and put the money in it. When the master came back, the servant with the 1,200 said, "You handed me 1,200, sir. I have gained another 1,200. The master said, "Capital. You excellent and trusty servant, you have been trusty in charge of a small sum. I will put you in charge of a larger sum. Come and share your master's feast." The same happened with the second servant, but the servant who was afraid of his master placed his in the ground and only handed him back what the master gave him, and was rebuked by the words, "You idle servant." And the 250 pounds was taken from him and handed to the servant who had 1,200. For to everyone who has shall be given, and the richly given. Here it is the Master showing that unless we use this great creative power handed to us by our Father, we shall be like the servant who put the Master's money in a hole in the ground. What good would it do to us to leave this creative power untouched? We would be like the good-for-nothing servant who was thrown into the darkness outside, where men wail and gnash their teeth. This is meant where those who fail to make use of their faculties are on the outside, bemoaning the fact that others have plenty while they have nothing. So grand and comprehensive are these parables that they could be applied to so many things in life. I have already in the last lecture pointed out the only way in which this power can be used safely and profitably and through the recognition of its source, which makes in all ways subservient to the law of love. The divine marriage is attained by the individual who recognizes the union between the individual consciousness and the universal consciousness or spirit, which is the creative power in man, and the recognition that the law of power is one with the law of love. There are many who have made their way in this world without the law of love. This type, although cultivated in their powers, are minus the robe of love, and this again is shown in the parable of the feast in Matthew 22, 1-14. Where it tells that the realm of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a marriage banquet in honor of his son. And when the king sent out his servant to tell the invited guests to come to the feast all prepared for them, they paid no attention. So the king sent his servants into the byways to invite anyone they met to come to the marriage feast. So the feast was supplied with guests. When the king came in to view the guest, he saw a man not dressed in a wedded robe. So the king said to him, "My man, how do you get in here without a wedded robe?" And the man was speechless. Then said the king to his servants, "Take him out and throw him into the darkness. Their men wail and gnash their teeth." This is the one who may succeed, yet not in the wedded robe of love, is seen by the king. He is not allowed to enjoy that which he has ground for himself. Is this not true to life? So without the law of love we shall not enjoy the riches held in store for us in the Father's house. In this way we see how the practical application of the creative principle can be used to our advantage, thereby fulfilling all of our own spiritual and material needs. The divine power can never be separated from divine love with impunity, and we learn this often through bitter experiences. So we see on the one hand the idle steward, who never made any use of his talents, and the other who developed his talents divorced from the law of love. Therefore the practical application of our faculties and opportunities is to use our faculties not only for ourselves, but so that all shall share in the benefit of our actions. Again we see the great truth that although we may have plenty of material goods, we may never enjoy them, because it is only in love that we can enjoy anything worthwhile, for love is harmony, and harmony is happiness. Because it is in accordance with the law of the universe, and one has only to turn from inharmony to harmony to express the true nature within. For we are told that nothing will be remembered against us. Neither can it be, for where love reigns, only harmony can exist. Thus the prodigal son returned, and nothing is remembered of the past, for in life there is only the present. The past and the future are but dreams. If we hold on to the past with fear for the future, we will never know the glorious moment now, for the moment to moment is eternity. The supreme mastery in the individual being is that when the individual obeys nature, nature will obey that individual who realizes it, and this is but the ordinary rule of science and common sense. The universal principle can never act contrary to itself, whether on the spiritual or material plane. So we can never make use of these principles on any level unless we are prepared to study this law of obedience. But immediately we begin to obey, so does the law become our humble servant, obeying us in every particular on this condition, that we obey it first. The life principle is not separate from ourselves, but is a supporter of our individuality. Therefore, the more we understand the general laws underlying it, so will we be able to put it into operation, the practical application of the creative principle, which is inherent in all by virtue of our likeness to our Creator, as stated in Genesis, that we are made in His image and likeness. When religion and science are prepared to go hand in hand, the one guiding the other, we will arrive at the inspired philosophy that will lead all mankind into the practical application of the divine principle, which alone can give mankind what he is seeking. And only by its translation into our daily living will we have that liberty that is ours now by partaking of it. What we really are in essence is a concentration of the one, universal life spirit into conscious individuality. And if we live in this recognition of the truth as our starting point, it gives us freedom and the use of the creative power. But we cannot do this if we think that we have a center and the infinite another. We can only be free by recognizing that the infinite, who is all there is, and is the only living being, is and must be capable of centralization in itself, and this center is you and me. You must think of those truths until you see that it is impossible to be otherwise. Then step forward with that confidence that is born of a faith through understanding that the universal creative principle must necessarily act with the same mathematical precision in yourself as it does in the attraction of atoms of matter or in the vibration of ether, in creating worlds and planets and all that exists therein. When we come to know the teaching of Moses and the teaching of Jesus, we will see that they are identical, that there is only one being anywhere and everywhere, and the various degrees of it manifested consciousness can only be measured by the recognition of the meaning of the words, "I am the life." This was the true and accurate understanding of the Masters, which placed him in the forefront of clear thinkers of all time, and all clear thinkers today acknowledge as fact. What we have been shown is that the working laws inherent in human nature follow an intelligent sequence of cause and effect, and only this higher specialized knowledge can help the human race, and it is impossible to lay too much stress upon it. Thus we see that the differing creeds, dogmas, and beliefs are stumbling blocks on the path of human progress because of the antagonism caused through them. We see many like the elder brother who will not go into the Father's house, while his brother, who is not of the same belief, is in there making merry at the feast. Those who enter have no belief, they just enter into their inheritance. They have already tasted what separation means, and have learned now how to love all their brothers and sisters. For only those who can love their neighbors as themselves can wear the robe of love that entitles them to partake of the marriage feast, the union of the individual with the universal, which can only become a reality through the law of universal in the individual being expressed through the individual. We discern clearly now that the law of love is not only a principle of ethics, but the means of our self-preservation. Thus we see the Son of God and the Son of Man united in one, as we saw the Christ manifest through Jesus. This practical application can be yours, too, by practicing the teaching of the Masters. For unless we understand and practice the fundamentals that underlie our future progress, mankind will still be led by the blind that lead the blind, and we all fall into the ditch. Freedom lies in understanding, and understanding will strengthen our faith that moves mountains, and this will bring forth that which is in the unseen to the seen. That which is, already is now, and will be made manifest. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. I have told you all this while I am still with you, but the Helper, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you everything and reveal to you everything I have said. Christ, the Spirit of truth in you, will reveal everything I have said to you, for he alone who rests in the Father's bosom knows the truth. For that which is to be is already ordained and must come to pass. He that soweth to the Spirit shall the Spirit reap life everlasting. Galatians 6:8. Those who love me, I love them. Those who seek me find me. I hold wealth and honor. What I yield is better than the best of gold. What I bring in is better than rare silver. I deal fairly, justly do I act, enriching those who love me and filling their stores full. Proverbs 8:17-21. So mote it be. End of lesson. Chapter 4, The Free Gift of God. In this lecture, I want to gather together some of the vital points given in the previous lectures in this series. It is very important that you get a clear understanding of the fundamental principles revealed in these lectures. Perhaps this is one of the finest series we have had, each series being a little more advanced than the one before it. That is why no student should miss any of these lectures if at all possible, for they contain so much that you require in your application of the creative power in your daily living. You will notice that there is nothing speculative. All bears towards the practical application of the creative power, which we saw in our last lecture that Jesus manifested. And there is nothing more fundamentally true than this fact that if we do not translate this power into action in our own lives, we have not put into practice what was revealed to us, and it remains imperative for us to do so and use this tremendous force for the benefit of ourselves and others. The first fact we have to consider is that all there is infinite. This means that there is nothing outside the infinite, therefore all must be in it and of it. That there is no other substance, life, consciousness, or power, but that which is infinite. Therefore all substance is infinite, and is therefore indestructible. Not one particle of substance of matter, as we know it to be, can be destroyed. It may change its form, and that change nothing is lost. We have called the change in form decay, and decay to the moral sense is the form of death. But when we examine this further, we can see that there can be no death anywhere, as generally thought. It is because we do not discern or understand the law of change or transition that we assume a thing to be dead. And this is but a lack of understanding. There cannot be one particle of infinite substance dead. Modern science has proved this to us through the atomic formation which underlies all structure, whether there be a mineral, vegetable, or animal tissue, which is visible to the human eye. Science has gone further to show that all solids, fluids, and vapors are but a modification of the ether of space, which fills all space and still supports all these forms. That this substance has a basis of intelligence and acts according to definite laws which are stable and eternal, showing that there is an infinite intelligence underlying everything. This intelligence in creating form produces energy, and in the transformation there is nothing lost. From the principle of energy, all energy comes forth and is again absorbed into the principle, showing the indestructibility of all matter or energy which is cognized by our senses. It has also been proved that consciousness is cause behind all creation, whether in the creation of a universe by the Supreme Being, or the consciousness in ourselves, used to create by our thought that which outpictures itself into form, condition, and circumstance. We are told that consciousness exists in all creation, whether it be in the mineral, vegetable, or animal, human or angelic, and that this consciousness cannot be other than the consciousness of the infinite, for there can be no consciousness apart from him, so all must be of the one consciousness. And this consciousness unfolds or evolves, it controls all that is less conscious than itself. Thus we have dominion over all things upon the earth, and as we unfold into higher expression of the same consciousness, so will we have dominion over the dominion in which we function. That is why Jesus said, "All power is given to me in heaven and on earth." The fact that he could function in both realms shows that he was aware of this truth. This truth is that which he spoke of when he said, "But anyone who drinks of the water I shall give him will never thirst any more. The water that I shall give him will turn into a spring of water welling up into eternal life." John 4:14. The fact that drinking is symbolical of taking into oneself, so this truth, when we realize it, becomes part of ourselves. We must drink it, and it is the drinking of this water that counts, not just the intellectual knowing of it, but when it becomes a reality to us and ours, and never thirst any more. If you knew what is the free gift of God, and who is asking you to drink, you would have asked him instead, and he would have given you living water. John 4:10. Now this living water is that free gift of God to all who will drink it, the true understanding that dissolves all doubt and fear from the consciousness. As the infinite must be all there is, there can be no other creation but his. Therefore he becomes what he creates. This is the meaning of the words, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And this same Word was made flesh. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made. In him was life, and the life was the light of man, and the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. And this same Word was made flesh." The darkness is the intellect of man, as exclaimed in the lecture on the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In the light of man, there must be included the fundamental principles inherent in that which was the beginning. These principles I have shown you were the principles of love and wisdom, being the pillars of the temple, and this temple is the temple of the living God. Ancient Freemasonry was aware of these truths, and the two pillars at the entrance to the temple were represented by secret words, which were only passed on by word of mouth. If the candidate did not know these words, he could not be admitted. Unfortunately, Freemasonry today has lost the truth and has become more and more of a social club than an order of truth, and I doubt if it will ever regain its place in the world as such. I have given many lectures to Freemasons on this vital thing, but it does not sink in very far for the simple reason that the truth, as it was known to the ancients, is entirely lost to the present form of Freemasonry, I am sorry to say. I told you also in one of my lectures in this series that the principle of love and wisdom were combined with will being the expression of the truth itself, as well as the power behind and in the manifestation. When one is consciously aware of this truth, the will reaches out far beyond the limits of the brain and influences people and things, causing them to be inclined towards a desire of that will. This power has been quoted as a mental power that acts upon others, even at a distance, and this power works as surely as the sun rays affect plants and flowers. For it is this will, creative in nature, that is behind all life's manifestation in all the kingdoms on earth and in the heavens. Herein lies the secrets of power in man. Man must first learn the laws of life, and by understanding them can he do greater things, as stated by the Master himself, because of our more advanced knowledge of the structure of the forms we are aware of, and of the advancement in science revealing truth that were only visionary to past generations. Although the Masters knew the structure of matter, our physicists and scientists did not. The majority of people in the world are ignorant of true facts, with the results that they create in their minds a mental concept of what they see, feel, and hear. But when we examine these concepts, we find that there is no evidence to substantiate what they believe to be true. They live in a world of illusion, and this is the cause of their feeble and inefficient and ineffectual expression. If they do succeed, it is merely by a hit-and-miss arrangement, and not by understanding. When true understanding comes, there is no uncertainty, but direct expression of the law operating accurately through cause and effect. We have already seen that solids change into fluids, and fluids into vapors, and vapors into higher form of the same substance that underlies them all. They ascend 1 degree higher up the scale of vibration until they mingle with that substance that manifests throughout all space, and there is nowhere where this substance does not exist. We learn that life consciousness is the ruling factor in this substance, and that this substance responds and forms take place, thus again reminding us that the infinite becomes what he makes. Therefore, mankind must be included in this, for it cannot be otherwise, and as our consciousness becomes aware of this, so do we create according to the divine law inherent with us. Thus are we the means through which the infinite is bringing forth his creation now, and now is always eternity. That is why I have always told you that the past and the future are but dreams in the mind that is not aware of this truth. If we are prone to dwell upon our past experiences with fear for the future, we can never be pure channels for the creative power that is eternally active now. The chaotic state of man's mind today is the result of his fears, and fear is the basis of all his other negative emotions that appear to produce the vicious circle in which man lives. It was the purpose of the teaching of the Master to direct man away from this state into one of perfect liberty, which he has now if he will only realize it. The Christ of God is the light of man, and this light was in the Master who revealed its individualization in himself, and that this same power was individualized in each one of us, and it was this we had to realize. Do not mistake me when I say that the same individualization of this great power still exists. Of this truth I know. It is Spirit's eternal manifestation of itself, but we cannot understand this truth unless we understand that we are not born of flesh and blood, but of the Spirit, and in this realization we can be with him who revealed the truth by his practical application of the creative power. He himself said, "Where I am, so shall ye be also." The Christ is not a separate entity, but the Father expressing himself. Know ye not that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? It is the Father, whoever remaineth in me, is performing his own deeds. Thus there is the ever-present, eternal, birthless, and deathless, which is impossible of decay, And when we identify ourselves with this, our true selves, we will no longer be impotent in the world and chaos, but a tower of strength to all who need us. And that need is very much in evidence at the present time. Some are afraid to speak of this blessed thing. Their fear is their downfall. As soon as you become aware of this truth, you will rise above doubt, fear, and apprehension, as the mind is renewed day by day. Fear and faith are but the opposite ends of the yardstick, which we measure with our minds. When fear is uppermost, faith is down, so we are continually turning the yardstick up and down, with the result that we do not get very far. But when understanding comes, this state disappears when there is a realization that there is but one creative power. So we create knowing that whatever our thoughts are, they are sure to manifest. Consciousness is cause. This was and is the state of the Master, always subject to the will of the Creator with whom we identify ourselves. So whatever task is before us, we perform through the will of God. Thus we become channels for a fuller and fuller expression of the creative power. Is this not what you are seeking? As we complete the task well, so will we be moved up. Trusty servant, you have been trusty over a small sum. I will put you in charge of a larger sum. We see that the divine marriage is the recognition of the union of the individual with the universal. When this takes place, we sit at the Father's table and partake of the bounties thereon, and there is no limit to supply, as was shown to the elder brother who stood at the door, and that door is always open, and the gift is free, as the Master said to the woman at the well. If you knew what is the free gift of God, and who is asking you for a drink, you would have asked him instead, and he would have given you living water. Jesus was speaking from the Christ principle, the Son that knew the Father, the Word that was with God, the Word that was God, the Word that was made flesh. This is the gift of the creative power inherited by us, that can mold all things, and as the creative power cannot act antagonistic to itself in any place of manifestation, we learn that the law of love is the essential thing in this plane as well as in the higher. To work in opposition to another's welfare is to work against oneself. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law, and is the shield for our self-preservation. Listen, my children, to a father's instruction. Attend and learn intelligence. I give you good counsel. Turn not from my teaching. Keep in mind what I say. Do what I bid you, and you shall live. Swerve not from my orders. Get sense, get knowledge, at any cost get knowledge. Never leave her, and she will guard you. Love her, and she will take care of you. Prize her, and she will promote you, and bring you to honor. If you will embrace her, she will adorn you with charm and crown you with glory. Listen, my son, take to heart what I say, and the years of your life shall be many. I am giving you wise directions and leading you aright. When you walk, you will never be hindered. When you run, you will not slip. Hold fast to my instructions, never let them go. Keep them. They are life to you. Proverbs 4, verses 1 through 2, 4 through 13. So mote it be. End of lesson. Chapter 5 is not wisdom calling. The greatest and most desired thing by every living soul is the method required to use the self in such a way to express the creative power that is inherent in all. The cause of most failures in this all-important thing is that most people only recognize a creative power that is outside themselves, and they look to this power to do the work for them, not realizing that the same creative power is within themselves, and that they can use it with effect and accuracy in any direction they wish, provided they know the laws upon which it works. Ancient wisdom was and is today the most advanced interpretation of this truth, and this is definitely shown to us through the teaching of those who understand the fundamental principles underlying God, man, and the universe. There existed in Persia, before and after the death of Jesus 2,000 years ago, a great school under the direction of the wise men of the East, other known as the Magi. At the same time, there was also a school in Egypt under the direction of the great therapeutic of the ancient Egypt. These schools were not only schools for the study of the great subject pertaining to God, man, and the universe, but the practical application of the creative power was developed by those who were admitted, and legend tells us of their wonder workers. Ancient literature, which I was privileged to see when I was in Tibet, showed me that the knowledge of the masters today is the same knowledge known to the ancients. This knowledge was previously kept secret from the masses, and only those who had the utmost desire for truth were allowed access to these wonderful truths. For example, a young man came to Geshe Rinpoche, one of the Tibetan masters, asking to become one of his students of Chilas. Geshe Rinpoche took him down to the river, asked him to kneel with his face touching the water. Then the master held his face under the water until the young man struggled for his breath. When the master let him up, he asked him what he desired most when his face was under the water, and the young man said, "My breath." "Well," said the master, "when you desire the truth as much as you desired your breath, come back to me." To know that this truth is the greatest treasure in the world, you would think that anyone would desire it ardently. But the parable told by the master about the feast and the invited guest, when the king sent his servants out to tell the invited guests to come to the feast, they paid no attention, is significant of the same attitude today. In these ancient records there are statements of fact stating that Jesus sojourned at these schools of the wise men of East and learned of this wisdom and lore, and also to Egypt to the great Therapeute, who were also a student, as well as being a member of the Essene in his own land. And with his own inner vision, he became the greatest master of all time. The reason why people today are ignorant of this knowledge and wisdom is because of the stupid and puerile version of the truth depicted in Sunday school books, etc. God is represented as a bald-headed old man with a long white beard, clad in flowing robes to hide his body, and many other stupid versions which had shown long ago been relegated to the wastepaper basket. Is it any wonder that skeptics, infidels, and scoffers of spiritual truth have arisen in great numbers when they are asked to accept such rubbish or be damned to a place called hell? I showed you in my last lecture that hell could only be an imaginary place where God was not present. But as you know that God is infinite, eternal, and present everywhere, if there is a hell, God must be there also. Heaven is a state of consciousness acquired through the realization of the oneness, the union of the individual with the universal. The universal gives rise to the individual, and the individual gives expression to the universal. Hell is a state of consciousness where this realization does not exist, a state of separation. It is not the purpose of this lecture that I go into the history and work of the Magi of Persia, or the great therapeutic of ancient Egypt. What we intend doing is to express in modern language these great truths, which are the pearls beyond price, which these ancients knew, understood, and practiced. This same knowledge and understanding was expressed by Jesus himself in his great work of healing and teaching. This knowledge can also be yours, and there is not anything that can compare with it. It is more precious than fine gold, and there is no value like unto it, the prophets have told us. What is wrong with most people is that they are ruled by what has been told them. They have not thought things out for themselves. They have not used their divine gift of reason. Their brains are all memory and are wrapped up in ignorant concepts. They may say, "We have always believed in God," but they don't know where he is. They look into the sky and say he is up there somewhere. What good is that? Fortunately, the present generation is not taking to what their parents believed. They want to think things out for themselves. So they will become their own salvation, as well as the salvation of the future generation. Most people are slaves to tradition and thought and religion, with the result that the world is still perpetuating its own ignorance. Most people at the age of 50 and over get set in their ideas. It is only those, although up in the years, but young in mind, that wish to know more and more about the reality of things. A lot of our older people will say, "But I have had a bit of experience." But the trouble is they cannot keep their eyes off of it, so they turn around and walk back through life instead of going forward. This world is suffering from chills and fevers, panics and booms. Something is wrong with the temperature. It is up and down like the waves of the sea. Can this be cured? That is the question. I'm sure it can, but we must go to the mountaintop and view things from above and see what is going wrong. By our divine reason and insight, and with understanding of the teaching of the Master, the wise men and the prophets, we will see our own mistakes. We will view things from a different viewpoint. We will see that we ourselves are the cause of our chills and fevers, our panics and booms, our wars, and our conferences that end in naught. What we must do is to stop groaning about the miserable details of our life and look with the eyes of truth into the world that could be a paradise for all when the laws of life are understood and operated upon by all individually as well as collectively. Whenever we knowingly operate upon these laws, troubles and worries are changed into opportunities, courage and understanding. Although the road ahead seems covered with mist, this should not daunt the one who knows that the creative power in God is the same in man, and its practical application is the same. We must look the way we intend to go. One cannot go east by always facing west. We will go the way we face. The human race as a whole is moving up. As to whether any individual moves up, that depends upon himself. Nature is always waiting to give a hand if you will but trust her. There is no promised land for those who can see nothing but a wilderness. Lead kindly light amidst the encircling gloom. Lead thou me on. I do not want to see each step enough for me. Lead thou me on. This shows that the consciousness of the universal mind is one with the individual mind now. And when we realize it, we know that this is a light amidst the encroaching gloom, that light that leads us on, and we do not want to see each step is enough. Herein lies the spirit of power, the creative power in man, the source of will, imagination, and thought. We have already seen that there cannot be any other self but the infinite self. There cannot be any other mind but the infinite mind, and therefore there cannot be any other substance, force, or intelligence but the infinite. We can only use infinite substance, mind, or energy, for there is none other, whether we know it or not. But when the divine marriage takes place, that is, when the individual merges with the universal, knowing and understanding that they are one and the same, all is possible to those who realize it. When the universal gives expression to the individual and the individual gives expression to the universal, then the unlimited resource of the infinite mind are available to those who will partake of this gift. This is the feast we explained in the parable of the prodigal son. We have only to recognize and realize this, and state begins to grow as the consciousness becomes more aware of itself, as the individualization of the infinite or universal consciousness. With this state there is neither fear nor doubt, but an awareness that rebukes all doubt and fears that get in the way. Consciousness is the creative principle in the universal as well as the individual mind. It sets in motion the process of creative growth, which becomes automatic and manifests in form, the idea the consciousness holds. Therefore, the law of the universe is identical with the law in man, the only difference being in the degree, and this degree of awareness expands as the conscious unity between God, man, and the universe grows in the individual. This universal mind is all there is, and there is no outside it. All is mind, and matter is mind materialized. The Bible is throughout dealing with those three factors, God, man, and the universe, and explains the law of evolution by which God passes into more and more perfect forms of self-expression, culminating in the perfect man-woman. And however deep the mysteries all may encounter, there is nothing unnatural anywhere. All is natural, and everything has its place in due order in the great whole. If we have a mistaken conception of this order, this may lead us to invert or reverse it, and by so doing provide negative conditions, which we so often rebel against. But this inverted action is perfectly natural, for it is all according to the law and how we operate upon it. These laws of the universe, while within or around us, are always the same. The only question is whether through our ignorance we shall use them in that reverse sense which reveals them in the law of death, misery, and happiness, or whether we use them in that true and harmonious order which reveals them in the law of life. The wise men and masters and the prophets reveal to us in various ways for our intelligent inquiry to penetrate the various veils which hide them from the eyes of those who will not take the trouble to investigate for themselves. It is this grand order of the universe that is symbolized by Solomon's temple. It is seen clearly that Moses was the medium through which the infinite showed himself as the universal, as the people of the I Am, as detailed in the narrative of the burning bush. The promised land is the realizing of that land which flows with milk and honey, which is symbolical of spiritual food, which means plenty in the place of the individual, when the individual enters the promised land. When the enemies are extirpated from the promised land, this condition would be forthcoming to all who realize it. The enemies are those inverted concepts which the ignorant conceived without due regard to the natural law. Thus Moses lifted the serpent up in the wilderness so that all could gaze upon it and be healed. The serpent is symbolical of the life principle in man, and when this is lifted up to its proper place, it is seen from a completely new view to that which man had fallen through his ignorance. Yet Moses knew that there was a far grander end in view, and looking down the long vista of the ages, he saw not Solomon, but a greater than Solomon is here. O wouldst thou raise up a prophet like unto me? This was the fuller and fuller expression of the infinite life revealed through Jesus called the Christ. This was the Christ of God who revealed himself as a Spirit of truth that would reveal unto all men the presence of the Almighty. So the people of the I Am the life, are concealed among all nations, and must be brought forth by the prophet who would follow up the work of Moses further, as the universal expressed in the individual. Those three, Moses, Solomon, and Jesus, are the builders of the temple. Firstly, Moses erected the tabernacle, the portable temple that which accompanied the Israelites on their journey. Solomon reproduced it in an edifice of wood and stone fixed firmly upon its rock foundation. Jesus then came and said, "Destroy this temple, and I will rise it up in 3 days." He spoke of the temple of the body, the temple of the living God, and within this temple God dwells and moves into a fuller and fuller expression of himself in the individuals who realize it. This is the secret of the great Magi, the wise men of the East, the secret of the great therapeutics of ancient Egypt, and is a secret now revealed to you. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Is not wisdom calling, knowledge raising her voice? On the high ground by the roadside, in the street she takes her stand, by the gateways opening to the city, at the entry she is crying out, "O men, I am calling to you. My appeal is to all men. O heedless souls, learn insight. O foolish folk, learn sense. Listen, for I have a weighty message. My lips open with right words. I utter what is true. False lips I loathe. All I say is honest, with nothing in false or wrong. 'Tis all plain to a man of sense, and true for those who are intelligent. Choose instruction rather than silver, and knowledge rather than gold, for wisdom is better than rubies. No treasure is equal to her. So mote it be." End of lecture. Chapter 6. The Key to Knowledge. Wisdom is calling and knowledge is raising her voice. The wise men and the prophets tell us that it is plain to the man of sense and true to those who are intelligent. We are told that it is better to choose instruction rather than rare silver, and knowledge than rare gold, and that wisdom is better than rubies, as no treasure is equal to her. The one who finds the unity of the whole expressed in him or herself has obtained the key to knowledge, and it is now in their power to enter intelligently upon the study of their own being and the use of that being in ways that will bring satisfactory results. By doing so, they become helpers of others to advance into the greater light. This is the one who is able to become a builder. The builder becomes the balanced person who is guided by wisdom and knowledge and is not affected by what is seen in the outer, but has the true interpretation of reality, and therefore understands that all is possible with his wisdom and knowledge. And to those who put this wisdom and knowledge into action, there is a more fascinating story than that written about the leading characters in the Scripture, and Paul gave us the key to their interpretation when he stated that the leading characters also represent great universal principles. And as we progress further in these lectures, we will reveal some astounding facts that will revolutionize our thinking. God, which we name the Universal Spirit, can only be described as love and wisdom. Whenever the individual discovers the relation between the universal and the individual, there is a feeling that cannot be described. To describe what is primarily feeling is to attempt the impossible, but the essence of this feeling consists in the recognition of a reciprocity of such a nature that each supplies what the other wants, and neither is complete without the other. When this recognition by the individual of his or her own nature and of the relation to the universal takes place, the individual is reborn, as the Master said, this time born of the Spirit. For then you are no longer the self you were before, but your self becomes the reproduction of the universal self, which is conscious of that self. Then you become more and more the expression of that universal self as you grow into a fuller understanding of the law by which the greater self develops within you. You learn that this greater self within the self is the true builder, because it is the individualization of the infinite creative power of the universe. You will realize now that the working of this power must always be a continual building up through you of greater things as you recognize it more and more. Therefore, the infinite creative principle can have no other action than a continual expansion of itself, whether in the colossal scale of a solar system or through mankind. This self-same, self-inherent activity is the same in both, which is forever building up. If we keep this in mind, it becomes clear to the enlightened individual that the individuality is the manifestation of the universal principle, and at this stage the individual who identifies himself with the spiritual force becomes a developing factor, for it is seen that whatever takes place in the universal must of necessity take place in the individual, for the two are inseparable. They are one and the same. Now this truth is a paradox to those who have not yet understood the symbol of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The tree of life, as we were told, was universal life consciousness, which had individualized itself in man, and this was the only reality. But if this individual consciousness did not realize its fact, it would eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This was man's intellect, wandering in the barren wilderness, what he speculated about things not knowing what they were. So as he experienced, through his reaction he called that which was unpleasant evil, and that which was pleasant he called good. But you will see that both are relative to himself, and are both equally created by himself, just as fear and faith are his own creation. Faith being of the very inconsistent nature according to our understanding, but when we become aware that the creative power in ourselves is the only power there is, we realize that what we think, so do our thoughts manifest. So if we think evil, we reap in effects that we sow in thoughts, and this was the paradox of the inner and the outer, the personal and the impersonal, a carnal and a divine. But in reality, there is only one mind, one life or spirit behind all creation. The carnal is the reflection of the individual, distorted by the individual who thinks himself separate. So there are apparently two selves, a higher and a lower. The lower self is an illusion of the self, for there is in reality only one self, that is a spirit, as I've already shown, and as this truth becomes more and more known, so will the self become brighter and brighter as we unfold unto it. As Jesus said, the inner becomes the outer, and the outer the inner. The real self is the embodiment of the truth, and the so-called lower self is this truth reversed by one who is ignorant of the oneness of the infinite, as I explained to you in my last lecture. We are told that there is a devil. Now when we begin to understand that the infinite is infinite in nature, that is, that he is all there is, and there is no other power but his, and he is omnipresent, and that there is no part of infinity where he is not, then how could the devil exist in the infinite, which is love and wisdom and perfection? If the devil does exist, then the devil is God himself. One very pious person said to me the other day, "But don't you believe in Satan?" I said no, and I asked her, "Where's Satan?" And she said Satan was the angel which fell from heaven. So I asked her where heaven was, and she said she did not know. Now I said, the Master gave you the key to that when he said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. Then she realized the truth when I said, you are your own Satan. You are the angel who fell from heaven. Yes, of course, this is the truth. The angel's self, which is the only self, is justice, mercy, love, wisdom, understanding. Satan only exists when the spiritual attributes are not operating, and this is what is known as the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the intellect of man who is unaware of his own reality. So this devil has no ears to hear, no eyes to see, no heart to know, and no power except the power we give to ourselves. This Satan is a myth, clothed in the shadow of a mental image, and the only devil from which we must be redeemed is self. If man would look within, he will find his name is self, and if man would find his Savior, he must also look within, and there the Savior waits knocking at the door of the heart. He is the warrior who will dethrone the demon self. Reality is not the product of our thoughts. Reality is neither an idea nor an image. Reality is the self that is real and expresses reality, life, love, and wisdom. Then the so-called lower self disappears because it is not reality and disappears into nothingness where it belongs, and the sooner we discern this devil, the sooner will he disappear. Enthusiasm is a force that can overcome all things, but enthusiasm must be balanced by understanding. Unless we are able to reason from the source of all things, we develop an unbalanced enthusiasm which leads to disaster, and the reason why. When living in a materialistic sense, people are seldom able to see beyond secondary cause, is that we get things through certain visible channels, and we mistake these for the source. You will say the things you got you worked for, you bought with money. Well, of course you did. God does not put banknotes into your cash box by a conjuring trick. God makes things generically. Whether it be irons or brains, we have to use them. But irons or brains or whatever else it may be ultimately proceeds from the all-creative Spirit, and the more clearly we see this, the easier it will be to go direct to the Spirit. For Spirit creates things by becoming these things, and God has bestowed upon these gifts. His gifts, which are our abilities, and these operate different ways into each one. Be happy in your doing, and conditions will be created without undue strain, which leads to the Spirit's own true expression in the individual. It is the one Spirit that is functioning through all, yet this one Spirit functions in a variety of ways. Thus your enthusiasm is tempered with understanding, and without this, enthusiasm may become insanity, sheer madness without reason. Yet in its highest level it becomes the most beneficent force in the world. Beware of fanatical enthusiasm when one becomes seized with a craze to do this or that without due regard to wisdom and understanding. Take military enthusiasm, for instance. For centuries, every possible trick, falsehood, and device has been used to create enthusiasm for war. So man kills his brother, whom he has never seen, and is given medals for slaughter. In religious enthusiasm, we see in this the terrible, horrifying spectacle of the Spanish Inquisition, burning at the stake of thousands by religious fanatics, and recently the slaughter of Hindus by Mohammedans and vice versa. The hatred in some of our Christian sects for others who are supposed to worship the same God. In political enthusiasm, we see at every election, every possible device is used to create enthusiasm. The wildest promises are made without the slightest intention of carrying them out. In enthusiasm for justice, we see here that our courts, which are supposed to be courts of justice, become the arena for a battle of wits between the prosecuting and defending counsels. The witnesses are subjected to a grueling test beyond their mental capacity, and are forced into saying things that they had no intention of saying. And so the judge or magistrate accepts this evidence and decides upon it, with the result that the innocent are punished and lawbreakers are set free. Then we have cultural enthusiasm. Those who are supposed to possess it form themselves into a caste. They do not concern themselves with the progress of humanity as a whole. If we look back through the ages, we see Greece had a culture built on slavery. It is quite possible for a nation to possess a unique art and literature, and yet have the mass of its people living in servitude and squalor. The majority of cultures concern themselves with what is obsolete, glorifying the past, despise the present, dislike science and efficiency. Our literary and spiritual people are, for some strange reason, reactionaries. They cherish the obsession that knowledge, like wine, must be old and cobwebbed. They cherish childish writings of centuries ago which have no meaning or truth revealed by science and modern thinking. Then we have the humanitarian enthusiasm. This is created by pity, but there is no real love for the unfortunate fellow, no knowledge or understanding of how things could be righted as a whole. So the world is rotting into a form of communism that will not only bring disaster but misery as well. There is no love in communism or of our present day, and is doomed to failure, and if it does survive, it will bring humanity tottering to the level of the animal. Love alone and not force can save humankind. And lastly, we have scientific enthusiasm, this passion for truth and discovery, possessed by scientists of all branches, including the science of mind and life, has set us free from superstition and ignorance, broken down national boundaries, and marks great advancement for the future. There is nothing to be said against it except that it has added terribly to the horrors and destruction by war, and is caused by the desire of nations to acquire a means to conquer by force, instead of by understanding, wisdom, and love. Our religious leaders, men of letters, are still wallowing in superstition instead of teaching the truth of the oneness of life, the tree of life, the salvation of the race. Fools and blind, they were called by the great teacher 2,000 years ago, yet slowly they are learning to be wise and see the truth that the human spirit is a deathless entity, and is the every fiber of the universal life. The spirit of man is an eternal pilgrimage, eternal in time and infinite in space. The spirit in man is the seat of all inspiration and glorious achievement, and expresses its genius in the glorious manifestation we see in the physical world. These things are the result of the indwelling energies of the Spirit expressing itself through the individual faculties in you and me and others who learn to be wise. When the Self is united with the universal Self in conscious awareness, through this shall all the glory and inspiration for the great achievement be obtained. Wisdom is the breath of the power of God in all ages, entering into wise souls, making them sons and daughters of God and friends of the prophet. The Master said, "Call no man your father upon earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven." Mighty men are they who walk and talk with God. Listen to counsel and take advice, that you may manage your life wisely. Man thinks out many a plan, but 'tis the Eternal's plan that prevails. Proverb 19, 20 and 21. So mote it be. End of lecture. Chapter 7. Consciousness is Cause. In this lecture we will show the majority of the people in this world are lost in the effects which are seen on the surface, and this divorces them from the power that is theirs through understanding the hidden cause. When the cause of the effects are understood, a new world opens before us. 9 out of every 10 people you meet will tell you that what they see is all they know about things. But you who are advancing along the lines of reality know that such objects are but appearances, phenomena produced by the invisible life within them, which is their reality and cause, and that which is seen is the manifested effects. This is not only so with regard to living forms, but also with regard to all inorganic matter. All are constituted of the one life in different degrees or states of becoming, and all are ever changing in their state in accordance with the invisible action exerted from them within by the Supreme Intelligence. Consequently, the real is the invisible cause within the external appearances constituting our environment, and that reality is the one infinite life, the omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent One whose will, acting through the intelligence underlying all, determines the forms in which it manifests itself. This is one of the most important facts for us to remember when considering what we see external to ourselves. Without the consciousness in us, there would be no external world for us, and without life there is no consciousness. So it is life that is the ultimate reality both within us and in the objects external to us. We are told that man is made in the image and likeness of God. This is the truth that enables us to progress with the law of growth, and there can be no ending to this growth in us. But when man makes an image of God in his own mind, he finds that he must discard one God after another as he grows beyond the images he holds of his God. I have repeatedly told you that it is impossible to perceive the whole truth, but you grow in the truth by becoming the truth, knowing that man is made in the image and likeness of God. The truth that most people perceive is only in their imagination. It is only an idea in their minds, but truth is none of these things. But when we realize that we are the truth, even if our minds cannot comprehend it, we know that it is the infinite life which manifests itself through us. At the same time, we discern the action of this life, quietly understanding that it is life alone that is living and expressing itself. The individual becomes aware that the infinite consciousness and the individual consciousness are not separate, but are one in the expression of that consciousness. Therefore, it is impossible to try and comprehend this truth through a background of ideas caught up from the various religions with which they are changing interpretation, for when one theory is worn out, a new one is created, and so on from one theory to another. The mind becomes confused with the many ideas, and this causes conflict by trying to conform to these ideas. You will see that these are only beliefs, ideas, and will remain so. But truth is none of these. It is beyond ideas and images. It is behind all creation, yet we are one with it. So many people pattern their lives after what they have heard or read, and these are so many patterns all wrapped up in theories, and none is the truth. This is the illusion that blinds them to the truth of the one living God that is expressing himself in everything we see around us. The truth that I am revealing to you can be demonstrated in your lives. I am not saying that everyone is capable of demonstrating this truth immediately upon hearing it, but as you unfold it into this truth, so will the truth express itself through you. When your mind accepts this scientific reasoning, without effort, the truth will manifest itself as you begin to realize it more and more. A master does not flatter himself that he can accomplish what another person cannot do, for he knows that all are capable of giving expression to this power as one grows in realization. If you use your mind along the lines indicated in these lectures, you will find that there will be a continuous growth for you, and the time will come, as the great master said, all will be possible unto you. A very large promise, you may say, but nevertheless true. The things ye see me do, greater things will ye do. After the Master taught the multitude in parables, his disciples asked him, Why speakest thou to them in parables? Jesus answered, Because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. And afterwards he unfolded to his disciples the esoteric side of his teaching. There has always been the esoteric and the exoteric religions and sciences, and there will be for some time to come. The outer form and ritual for the masses, and the inner truth for students. Modern physicists are now studying the ether, the invisible electrical particles that make up matter. This is leading them into the secrets known to the Masters centuries ago, and we know, as students of the greater science of life, that there cannot be any manifestation outside of the infinite. Whether we look at a blade of grass or a drop of water, or upon a great city filled with a motley crew, or look upon our earth with its teeming myriads of humans and animals, or look away into space, system after system of worlds, all is the infinite in various states of manifestation. Everything in the universe is an unfoldment of the infinite life, and law teaches us that this unfoldment takes place upon the subjective plane before it appears on the objective. This law applies to everything, including ourselves, and it is this law that we have to consider as a law of growth in us. This great knowledge is gained in two ways: by knowledge of its principle from teachers who are schooled as masters, and by personal experience. But even when knowledge has been gained through masters, it does not put an end to experimentation and experience. For after the pupil has been taught, the real knowledge comes through action and experience. The question is often asked, who are the teachers? I will try to answer this as few words as possible. I have in my lessons of the cosmic explained that all humans are born angels, clothed in human form. And as cosmic evolution takes place, we pass upwards through the interior realms and become as we really are, divine in nature, otherwise angelic. When a new cosmic day commences and new planets are formed, in these angelic forms exists the evolutionary power inherent in these new planets. Moses and Jesus were the direct representations of these forces, while others were designated to link up with unfolding spirits born into the earth. For every human soul has its parent in the sun world, and are never separated from the infinite life which is forever mediated to them. There are some chosen to become students of the masters, at the same time become teachers on earth. Students who devote themselves to the science of life hold the same relation to the adepts as the adepts hold to the masters. There are intelligences in the universe far superior to man, yet as man unfolds through the cosmos, so do we all unite with the others in this great scheme for the cosmic creation. There are great angelic operators fulfilling the infinite scheme, and through these angelic forms flows the life current or consciousness of the infinite formulating the creative system, and from these angelic beings flows the life currents to the earth, to their offspring living in embodiment on earth, and as this conscious life is developed in the human soul, so is the thought inherent in the life current clothed in language, so that others can understand, and by the process of this communication, so do you have these advanced teachings. Some will doubt or even refuse to accept the statement that thought currents can be transmitted from the angelic spheres in that sun to earth. Yet they accept the fact that light and heat rays are being permanently transmitted. Heat and light are the objective aspects of the same life rays, which are invisible in the form of thought waves. There is a permanent transmission going on from the sun to the earth, similar to wireless, which is transmitted through space. When we tune into the wavelength, we get the voice, or if it is Morse code, we pick up the dot dash and transform it into words similar to those who are in contact with the forces of the angelic world. It is evident that the great angelic operators in question must possess and control greater knowledge than man can imagine. And as man can transmit vibration through space, it is quite conceivable that the angelic forces should be able to use their conscious life ray for a similar purpose. Mental telepathy has been proved between humans, yet some people will doubt that telepathy could be accomplished with even greater effect between angel and man. The idea concerning God changes as man develops, so he creates an idea of God according to his own unfoldment. While it is true that God created man in his own image and likeness, yet undeveloped man is forever returning to complement by creating a God in man's image. Man, living in the illusions of the effect of what he himself creates, reacts not knowing that he is alone in the Creator. So he is continually fighting an evil which he thinks is a power against God, so he elects himself the warrior, going out to fight God's battle against evil, while all the time it is man himself who creates the evil, and this is man's ignorance of his true nature. We are passing into the transition stage of man's conception of deity, broadening from the anthropomorphic to a real universal God without modification or limitation. The anthropomorphic idea means God made in the image of man with human weakness and limitations, with attributes ascribed to man's God which would not ascribe to the most backward savage. Progressive thinking, born of science, has long ago refuted this libel on the infinite creative power, and the further man unfolds, so does he realize that this infinite, omnipotent omniscience is love and wisdom. So we call this infinite divine consciousness. This consciousness, being universal, necessarily manifests everywhere. In all kingdoms, this consciousness manifests. In the mineral kingdom, we see this consciousness as the cohesive force in the form of minerals, what we call chemical affinity. A drop of water is formed by two gases, 2 parts of hydrogen and 1 part of oxygen, known as H2O. Why should these particular atoms form this concentration rather than any other? And the amount of power required to separate these atoms is tremendous. This is the will in action, the cohesive will holding 2 particles together so that all fluids can be formed. When these atoms are separated, they are brought into new conditions which show that there is still a conscious action in the finer and forms a combination with even greater force. In the vegetable kingdom, we see the selection of particles of minerals, the absorbing of gases from the air, and vital rays of the sun, which go to make up the different types of plants and vegetables. Here we see consciousness in a higher degree. In the animal kingdom, the consciousness becomes so individualized as to distinguish a higher form of consciousness in the human as its master and the lower in the vegetable. In mankind, we see this consciousness so developed that he can realize his oneness with the infinite, a consciousness that is capable of recognizing itself as a direct expression of the one and only consciousness or universal consciousness. In this is a law of growth in the individual. This was the great secret of the adept, to behold what the consciousness is aware of, has in itself the power to manifest that awareness. From man's point of view, the manifested part of the universal consciousness consists of 2 forms, visible and invisible, cause and effect. But as I told you before, cause and effect are one and are inseparable, and this is part of the law we have to study. Each of these, cause and effect, invisible and visible, is but a part of the complete unity of the universal consciousness upon the visible plane of manifestation. Divine consciousness expressing itself. Man has called this matter, yet matter separate from energy does not exist. Energy separated from intelligence or consciousness cannot exist. So we see clearly that what we see on the objective plane is but the result of the conscious manifestation of the infinite. Therefore, every particle we see or feel is infinite. Again, I must remind you that consciousness is cause. What you are conscious of, so must it manifest. This is the universal law inherent in the universal consciousness, individualized in man, carrying the same law into operation. This tremendous fact puts you in control of all, as you are told in the Scriptures. Man made in the image and likeness of God, with dominion over all things. The more this is realized, the greater is your awareness of it, and awareness means manifestation. Think firstly, are you aware of your consciousness, that consciousness being none other than the infinite consciousness individualized in you, and the center from which all thought and action must flow? Think secondly, are you aware of your thoughts, and are you just reacting to things as they come to you? If the latter exists, you are controlled by your environment, but if the former exists, then you can control your environment. You are the active, positive center around which everything must move. It is your duty to become that positive center, not only to yourself but to God. The Scripture says, "Thou shalt eat of the labor of thy hands. Happy shalt thou be, and it shall be well with thee." Psalm 128:2. Ether is the unparticled sea of divine mind and flows according to the impetus given to it both by God and by man. It moves in the direction in which it is sent. Ether is the medium in which all things are created and through which all things are connected. It does not impair or retard the forces you send into it, and it brings back to you precisely what you sent forth. It transmits all mental currents from one to another, from angels to men, and from men to angels. No wave or thought vibration can ever be impaired. Through ether, I can contact anyone or heal or help those who ask. If you think of me, I will get your call and will reply, help will come immediately. I can contact spiritual forces in a fraction of a second and ask their aid, and immediately it is given. Jesus said, I have only to ask, and legions will come to mine aid. Now try and realize what I have given you tonight. It is better than rare silver and the rarest of gold, for no treasure is like unto it. In Proverbs 15:33 and Proverbs 16:1-3, reverence for the eternal trains men to be wise, and to be humble is the way to honor. A man may think what he will say, but at the moment the word comes to him from the eternal, a man's ways seem all right to himself, but the eternal has the verdict on his life. Trust your affairs to the eternal, and your plans will prosper. As Isaiah said, it is the eternal speaking. As the Father hath loved me, so have I loved you. Continue ye in my love. A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love another. John 15:9 and 13:34. So mote it be. End of lesson. Chapter 8. Man is God Materialized. The only power we have lies in the subjective self. This self is the real self. The outer is but a manifestation of it. Although both are one, the inner and the outer, the inner is the receiver and the giver. What we believe we manifest. The Bible is always telling us to look to the eternal, the infinite, and to establish this in ourselves. It shows how these prophets understood the law of being when we begin to understand it ourselves. When we look through the objective self, we find that we are subject to all kinds of limitations, and these become suggestions which are accepted and naturally become subjective and are reflected outwardly again. If all our experiences are derived from this source, you can see how easy it is for one to become completely negative and carry this to the final issue. We realize that the creative power of our thought is the root from which all our experiences, whether subjective or objective, arise. We therefore become aware that everything depends upon the nature of the suggestions that give color to our thought. Whatever we are conscious of predetermines the predominating tone of our thought. But this very law we shall externalize what we fear. If on the other hand we grasp the great truth of the fundamental law of our being, as I've so often repeated to you, made in the image and likeness of God, then our thought shall be in accordance with the attitude we hold towards life. But this must not be just an intellectual acceptance of the truth. We must feel it deeply. It is feeling that is the motive power behind all manifestation. As I've already mentioned, to carry this to its final issue, we carry these suggestions with us through the gates of death, which is nothing more than moving from the objective sense to the subjective sense. And as this inner life is purely subjective, we will find ourselves still frustrated by our beliefs, and we will continue to be frustrated until we have paid the ultimate farthing. That is to cast off all these suggestions of impotence accepted in our ignorance. Immediately we accept the grand truth of our being, our sins are forgiven and we are free. We see here that this is not only applying to our inner life, but to our outer life in the body as well. And it was this that the greatest mental scientist of all time saw when he said, "Thy sins are forgiven thee, arise and walk." Man is God Materialized. This is a tremendous statement. But when we analyze it to the ultimate, we see that it is true. Then the feeling of this great truth rushes through us and fills us with an energy filled with this truth. Man is an invisible entity. What we see of him in and through the body is merely the manifestation of the inner man. Mankind is the expression of the infinite spiritual energy, a conscious, spiritual, intellectual, etheric, materialized energy, individualized in all planes, thus giving to man, woman, individuality and personality. It is through this realization the locked-up faculties and powers existing in every human being will manifest. The involved God powers now existing in man will spring forth, for in the heart of every living being lies a God, the cosmic spirit individualized. All evolution is merely bringing forth that which lies hidden within. The universe is our home and we grow in it. The seed of Abraham is a divine spirit, and it depends on our realization of it. The esoteric meaning of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is as follows. Abraham, the spirit in manifestation, known as the Father, or life individualized. Isaac, the soul, the manifestation of the breath. Isaac. Is means breath, and is sounded, as if drawing in breath. Ak is sounded as the breath flows out and means action, life in action. Jacob means the body. So we have spirit, soul, and body, the Trinity, the three in one. Yet Jesus goes further and shows the greater truth that sets him free. I am before Abraham. He identifies himself with the infinite. I and the Father are one. This was the conscious state of the man of Galilee, into which all must grow. It takes many years for the awareness of the consciousness to awaken in some people to many the conception of the abstract, which is the only reality, remains impossible. They cannot rise above the concrete, with the result that they continually react to the concrete, and their subjective self can only give to them what they are aware of. Many others have never attempted to analyze their own thinking process to its source, yet by doing so they would be able to identify their self-consciousness with the universal consciousness, the infinite. This alone determines the states of one's evolution, and evolution means the releasing of a spiritual energy from within. Our consciousness of self is due to the presence of the inmost principle, the infinite knower. For the fact remains that we cannot have any faculty unless that faculty was predetermined by the infinite knower. The history of the prophets and seers of all time reveal a magic that was awe-inspiring to the masses. Yet this so-called magic was but the releasing of this tremendous invisible energy through the consciousness. But before this could be done, there had to be a conscious awareness of it, and the feeling of this awareness was the secret of its manifestation. The ancient Magi used their powers in the direction of healing the sick. People were brought to the temples to be healed, and after the customary incantation designed to affect the imagination of the primitive people, they were found to be benefited, and many actually healed. Behind the veil of the ceremonies, the Magi released the spiritual energies of those who were open in or in the suggestive moods were healed. This stream of conscious energy is positive to both ether and matter, and a negative condition both in mind and body will yield to this positive force when properly and intelligently applied. This force builds up the body from a single cell and is inherent in every particle of the body. Every cell and combination of cells is supplied with this energy or force. The body is mind materialized, and every cell is a result of mind in action. We can now see that the mental state of an individual must be reflected upon the body. Therefore, mind over matter is not just a saying to us who know, it is a living law in operation. Fortunately for many, nature is kind, and she always tends to balance us through spiritual aids which we are totally unaware of. I have no theory in regard to healing. I know from study, experiment, and investigation, and through the assistance of the masters, both visible and invisible, that the releasing of spiritual energies in the individual results in a healing, whether it may be immediate or delayed. And when intelligently applied, apparently miraculous results are obtained. The finality is awareness. The subject of healing has been elaborately treated by many writers, and many have derived benefits from these writings. In some cases, these writers base their work upon the fact that all healing is the result of a change in belief. This is indeed a great truth when we realize that the subjective self is the creative faculty within us, and reflects whatever the objective impresses upon us. Now the objective self is the intellect, and what it sees it reflects in thought. This thought then is reflected as a belief, and this is then reproduced externally. But as we see that intellect is a very inaccurate thing, we have to go deeper to find the cause. So many people will not let go of their beliefs, although they are entirely false, so they have first of all to be convinced of the falsality of their beliefs and given reason for the new ones. It is only when they are shown the true law of causation that they get started out of their own lethargic dream. Now the only conception you can have of yourself in the infinite or unconditioned is a purely living spirit, not hampered by any condition of any sort, therefore not subject to secondary cause or conditions, which is the cause of most illness. Secondary cause is the individual who is not aware of his true state and who reacts to conditions or circumstances which he perceives within himself or external to himself, with the result that he externalizes his belief. Now when we take the teaching of the Master or those of the prophets, they direct us to the first cause, which is God, and as God cannot be conditioned in any way, and if we identify ourselves with first cause, we know that what we are aware of, so shall it manifest. I have often told you awareness is manifestation. The key to your happiness lies in your subjective self being impressed with this truth, and not with the beliefs resulting from secondary cause. That is when you are unaware of the truth and allow your subjective self to be impressed by the suggestion from the objective self, buried in ignorance. In many cases, where first attempts and healings are not successful, it is because all your life you have been holding on to a false belief in sickness and other limitations as a substantiality in themselves. This is the primary cause of your condition, and this has been ingrained in you since childhood, and can hardly be eradicated at a moment's notice. Not only this, but this belief is inherited from your parents, who have inherited from their parents, and so on since the fall of man. But as I have said, the Bible is a book which shows man the way to freedom and salvation, and when read with understanding will lead to freedom and happiness, instead of being made the means of subjecting mankind to a system of slavery and fear through religious dogma. In ourselves is the seed of Abraham, the divine spirit in man, and when we begin to realize it more and more, so will we perpetuate this seed, which becomes the salvation of the race. We shall no longer bring into this world souls born in ignorance. We shall no longer inherit from our parents the mind of a tramp in a world of plenty, but will come with realization of the truth in our very bones. In further reference to healing, we often find that in many cases there is an improvement in the patient's health, yet after a time the old symptoms return. This is because the truth of his own creative faculty has not penetrated down into the innermost depth of his subjective mind, only partially entered it. But as each succeeding treatment strengthens the subjective of the real state of being, a permanent cure is effected. This is the self-treatment that one should give oneself, the knowledge of the law of being. As this knowledge is not in everyone, the world is suffering from its own false beliefs. That is why we should consider ourselves extremely fortunate in gaining this wisdom that comes from the higher realms of being by telepathic communication for our benefit. A true healer is one who has acquired the knowledge of how to control the less conscious modes of spirit by the more self-conscious modes, and by his conscious awareness influences the consciousness of the patient, and in many cases entering into the subconscious realm and establishing there, by concentrated thought, a power that begins to work. At the same time, the patient's mind is subjected to suggestion of perfect health. Now the question may arise, how does the healer substitute his own consciousness for that of the patient? This is a most enlightening point to consider. Our ordinary conception of ourself is that we are separate individuals, that the two personalities are entirely separate. This is the great error. There is no such thing as separation or boundaries between one and another. The fact is that this so-called separation can be temporary or completely removed, so that the two individuals become one. Now the action that takes place between the healer and the patient is according to the awareness of the healer and the receptiveness of the patient, who uses his or her will also to remove the self-imposed barrier in the mind, which does not exist in reality. So the patient allows the spiritual energies to flow in, and the healer allows them to flow out. The law of the universe is so as to allow this flow plenteous to the vacuum. This was the secret of the Master, the secret of the Magi, and the secret of the ancient therapeutic of ancient Egypt. These secrets can become yours. More will be said on this subject later on. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. The message of the Eternal, listen to this, who are old, hear this, all of you, inhabitants of the land. Has the like of it ever been heard in your day, or in the days of your father? Tell it to your children and your children, to their children, and their children to your coming generations. Thus shall it be that I pour out my Spirit on all. Sons and daughters shall be inspired. Joel. Reference for the Eternal is the font of life. It shows how to evade the nets of death. He whose reverence is the Eternal has strong ground for confidence. His very children win security. Cease not, my son, to listen to instructions, and never turn away from a wise teacher. Proverbs. So mote it be. End of lesson. Chapter 9. From the Invisible to the Visible. A student who has been reading a number of books on truth, mind, life, etc., has become confused with the terms which your writers use, and I can see that this can happen to any one of you. So I want to speak to you about the meaning of these terms tonight. In most of the books that I scan, I have noticed that the writers are not fully versed in the meaning of the words that they use, and no wonder that anyone might become confused with the terms used. I myself seldom read any books now for the simple reason that few have a deep enough meaning of the truth and are often inaccurate and misleading. The main term used are mind, life, consciousness, thought, intelligence, ether, matter, form, subjective and objective mind, substance, infinite spirit, etc. All I can do in this lecture is to briefly explain the meaning of these terms. We will take the terms most used to begin with. The term mind is often confusing, for this word is used so many ways. Mind your mind was a saying used by some time by Americans as a slogan to advertise a mental course. Mind is generally used in a broad sense to explain thought and other activities of the mind, but to take it in its true sense, the word divine mind is meant to convey to the reader the idea of the mind of God, which must include everything that is perfect. Many try to interpret the divine mind by the action of their own minds, and the knowledge most people have of it is very limited, so it does not convey very much to the reader. Now, divine mind is a term used to convey the meaning of the complete action of the divine or God, which must include consciousness, intelligence, wisdom, love, power, etc. The term consciousness is the most important term used. The individual mind is the exact replica of the universal or divine mind, so we find in ourselves that consciousness is of greatest importance. For if we were not conscious, we would not know anything, nor could we become conscious of anything external, far less being able to think. Consciousness is that quality of mind that enables us to become aware of anything, also enables us to think, reason, and decide. Consciousness is the center from which all force, intelligence must flow, whether it is from God or man. Our consciousness in the material plane is very limited, and is but a fraction of the totality of our consciousness. For the same consciousness that is aware here is also aware in the inner realms of activity. Nothing exists except by the fact that it existed before it became manifest or visible, so consciousness is the mainspring of the mind. Many say that thought is a product of mind in the broad sense. We will grant that this is so. But to be more accurate, thought is the product of the consciousness. Thought is the power that goes forth carrying with it the necessary intelligence to establish the thought in the concrete or visible. But as we know that the visible could not exist except by the existence of the invisible, we can see that thought invisible becomes visible by the law inherent in itself. One can say that divine thought is divine mind in action. That is the consciousness, intelligence, wisdom, love, power of God manifesting. The term intelligence conveys to us a predetermined knowing, a knowing beyond the individual or human or angelic. The human mind cannot conceive fully the great meaning of this term, but when we see this universe, and all that it is moving ever onwards and upwards by means of this intelligence, it conveys a far greater meaning than what is usually applied to the term. Now, intelligence is not what we call intellect. Intelligence is an all-knowing, while the intellect is speculative. So the term intelligence is the knowing how to bring things about and must be inherent in the thought, otherwise the thought could never manifest. For when we think a thought, we do not know how it will come into operation. We know that there is a law that operates beyond our personal intellect, for intellect wonders how it is done, yet intelligence does it. The word wisdom is often used to convey the meaning of a wise person. But in this science, wisdom is an understanding, different to intelligence in this respect that wisdom is more personal. It can become a product of the individual, while intelligence is that all-predominant knowing in all things. Wisdom is the expression of God in man, a guidance that comes from God when the individual recognizes God as the reality within. Or in other words, when the human recognizes the divine as the source of his own being, the wisdom of God is in all things. So while man thinks it should be otherwise, the divine has the prerogative. Love is the most magic word ever used to convey the meaning of the divine nature, and we cannot understand this term fully until we ourselves have had some experience with love. The love of the divine is a love that is poured out to all irrespective of rank, wealth, position, good or bad. This love is seen as an ever-flowing fount of affection. We see it in many ways in human life. The most beautiful is the love of a mother for her baby. We see it also as an affection for a friend. Also, when people love each other, there is an active response, a reciprocity that is automatic and spontaneous. You do not have to think why you love, you just love. Yet this love can become possessive in the personal sense, and we must guard against its becoming an obsession. Those are just shades of the true love which we have not yet experienced. I think that the mother is the one who has come as near as humanly possible to that true love. Jesus, who manifested the Christ, demonstrated this love, and at times we can feel the warmth of this Christ love in ourselves, and this love is enriched by giving. There is a little book written on love, and the name of it is The Greatest Thing in the World, by Sir Henry Drummond. It is well worth reading. Love is the great attractive power of God, ever drawing us nearer to Him. The more we express love, the more we express our divine nature. And as we express this love, so do we become an attractive power for others. Love reveals the magic of magnetism. Therefore, love is an emotion of great power, and that power is attraction. We see this in every existing thing in the universe, from the minute cell of protoplasm to the completed form. whether it be an animal, human, or angel, and this power flows out and attracts to itself what it gives. The term power is seen as the effect of law. There is no power except by law, and law is the intelligence in action. Love, wisdom, and power are terms used when expressing the deity. These are inherent in the intelligence, that predetermined knowing of the infinite. Thought has power, law, and action. According to the consciousness being aware of itself consciousness, so will the power of the thought be. The term life, in the broad sense, means God. God is life. Life is God. When we begin to observe the fact that we are alive, even mildly speaking, we begin to recognize the meaning of life. Life is the only thing that lives, and we can get a greater abundance of it by recognizing it. Jesus said in other words that he came, that we should have more abundant life by realizing what he taught. Now, very few people take the trouble to analyze a term used and accept them in the broad sense, yet unless we get down to their finer meaning, we shall never be able to understand the great significance they have for us individually. Life must include all the attributes of the Creator, that is consciousness, intelligence, love, wisdom, power, individuality, etc., and the mechanism necessary to function in the form in which life is expressing itself. We see life as ever renewing itself, ever unfolding itself, ever present, no matter in what state, from the smallest to the greatest. The Master said, "I am the life." He recognized that he was life, and this we must do also before we can gain the significance of the term life. The term ether, known as the ether of space, is universal. No one has ever seen ether. No one has ever felt or tasted it. Science has postulated ether to account for the presence of matter. We are told that it is the basis of all matter, that matter is ether modified, become visible. Yet in its natural state, it is the medium through which we are all connected by thoughts of love, hate, etc. It conveys your love equally as it conveys your hate. If you love a friend, that love will reach him or her as if you were clasped in each other's arms. Ether carries all vibration, for modern science has proved that at the same place and the same time there may be an infinite variety of different vibrations or etheric waves of different length without any one of them interfering with each other. Not only does this ether convey such vibration created by us, but from the planets and stars vibrations are flowing to us continually. You can go out at night and absorb the vibration of the moon by night. Some of you be careful that it is not full moon. Or you can just go out and absorb the vibrations from the sun by day. This is a subject of great interest, which I will deal with later on. Ether, as I said before to you in a previous lecture, is the unparticled sea of divine mind in which we all live. Angels, men, and women, we all exist in this sea of divine mind. In it we become particled and formed both invisible and visible, from the invisible to the visible. As Paul said, things seen are not made out of things already made, but out of the unseen. We are all linked together and can commune with each other through the ether. All we have to do is to understand the modus operandi. The term matter is a very confusing one because we see it, feel it, taste it, but even then we do not know what it is. The term matter conveys to our mind what we see and feel with our physical sense. Yet science has proved to us that matter separate from energy does not exist. And the only meaning we can come to is that matter is a result of an intelligent energy producing vibrations of such a nature as to be distinguished by the senses. I am only sorry that time is not available to go into further details and findings of science in regard to this subject. But there is plenty of data available in the libraries and is well worth the time spent in studying the subject. The term form applies to what we see created in matter. Yet there are forms invisible to our senses existing in the invisible or etheric spiritual state. What we see in the concrete exists in the invisible and is the basis of that which is recognized in the concrete. Every element that makes up our bodies is held in solution in the atmosphere invisible. Form is the combination of the forces of nature brought into the concrete. There is no original form existing which is not a manifestation of God or Spirit. Objective and subjective. These terms are often substituted for conscious and subconscious. What is meant here is that we are conscious of through our senses is the objective, and the subjective is the receptive apparatus which receives these impressions. Some call this memory, others call it the unconscious, and others subconscious or subjective. Nevertheless, the fact remains we have a mechanism that recognizes and then receives the impressions, good, bad, or indifferent. These remain with according to the intensity of our awareness of them. This is a subject for a whole lecture, but as a lecture is merely to explain the meaning of the terms, we will make this suffice for the present. The term infinite is stupendous, and as I've already explained this in the previous lecture, you will have to refer to them for the explanation. The term spirit is synonymous with life or God. When we say spirit, we do not mean a spirit, but spirit. As Jesus said to the woman at the well, God is spirit, and you must worship him in spirit and reality, meaning that God is life, and you must worship him as real, not as an image, but as a living reality. I hope now that I have cleared away some of the misconceptions you have had with reference to terms, perhaps you will read books with many similar terms, and you will quickly note if the writers know the inner meaning of the words by what the writer says about them. In Proverbs 17 and 18 we read, "Even a fool may pass for wise if he says nothing. With closed lips he may be counted sensible. A fool is sure that his own way is right. Sensible men will listen to advice. A fool shows instantly that he is angry. A prudent man ignores an insult. A reckless tongue wounds like a sword, but there is healing in thoughtful words. Truth told endures forever. Fraud is the aim of the evil-minded, but those who plan the good of others prosper." Proverbs. So mote it be. End of lecture. Chapter 10. The Intelligence in Action. In our last lecture we dealt with a few of the terms used in our study of the truth or life. We have by no means exhausted these terms used in this vast and comprehensive subject of reality, and as I feel you've been helped greatly by the explanation given, we will deal with more of these terms later on. The unfamiliar terms used in this lecture will be explained briefly as we proceed. In this lecture I want to dwell upon some of the important aspects in relation to our activities in acquiring a greater understanding of the truth, as it affects ourselves personally. First of all, we have to recognize that what we see with our eyes must be and is but the expression of an idea that exists in the mind, either in the mind of God or in the mind of man. In other words, that which we see with the eye in the objective world is but the effect of the cause that exists in the invisible. For nothing can become objectified except it first existed in the invisible or subjective. This truth must be grasped, otherwise you will not gain the true understanding that is necessary for us to use the powers that are at our disposal now. Visualization is an activity of the mind of the individual. It is a form of picturization and is upheld by the law of the creative power within us. Visualization is an action in the mind where an idea becomes a central pivot upon which our visualization moves until we see the completed form in the mind. This completed form now exists in the invisible, and if we are faithful to our ideal, our visualization will appear in the objective. This is a law that is immutably fixed in ourselves by virtue of the creative power inherent in our consciousness. Visualization, further defined, is when the consciousness is concentrated on a particular idea. We call this a form of concentrated imagination by which we form or impress on the mind, and if we will take time to think, we will see what we are doing is that what we are creating in the inner world. The invisible, the realm of cause, that which will be externalized in the realm of effects in the form we visualize. We are a combination of spiritual and physical, or mental and material, or inner and the outer, all terms that mean the same thing, of which the two different manifestations are but one and cannot be separated. Successful results are obtained when we understand this, so that we know what we are doing. Then, as spiritual and material are but two aspects of the same thing, the latter must be the expression of the former. When we understand this law is in operation, we set about to create the conditions we desire. The Creator and the created are one. Matter is spirit made manifest, or in other words, mind materialized. Feeling is a sense that can only be explained by the experience of it in oneself. It is difficult to define, yet it is the motive power behind the thought or idea. And visualization helps to bring the power of feeling into operation. It creates the conscious energy behind the idea. Thought and feeling is the invisible combination. The more the thought is defined and the feeling intense, the more perfect and rapid is the manifestation. You will now see that the form of manifestation is but a result of thought and feeling, and according to the accuracy of the thought or the intensity of the feeling behind it, so will it be impelled into the outer exactly as it is held in the inner. This law is infallible, and the more we begin to realize it, the sooner will we make better use of our creative faculties. The imagination should not be allowed to run riot. It must be trained so as to make it a good instrument. It is a good servant but a bad master. We can let it run into avenues which will reverse what we actually want, avenues of fear, doubt, envy, jealousy, hate, etc. To guard against mental chaos, every idea should be subjected to a searching analysis based upon a true understanding that every idea is a blueprint of what is seen on the external. Then everything we do will be crowned with success because we will know what we are doing from the beginning. You cannot base your knowledge upon your external impressions alone, nor can you base your lives upon the experience of others, for this is the cause of most errors in one's life. The Christ in you is the Father manifesting in all His glory. This is the Son that rests upon the Father's breast. This is the wisdom that is able to see the errors and dissolve it, knowing that it has no power of its own, as ignorance alone is the Creator. Ignorance is but the absence of understanding, just as darkness is the absence of light. The fact still remains true that darkness disappears when light appears, so does ignorance disappear when wisdom appears. The secret of the success in all undertaking is the insight into the law inherent in our own being. This alone gives us the torch to light the way. The knowledge of this law of the higher forces makes all the futile efforts we see in our midst fade into insignificance. The mental strata of the majority of people in this world is clearly seen by the confusion of thought that exists in practically every field of endeavor. In worship, we worship a God of love in theory, but in practice make graven images of wealth, power, custom, convention, and fashion. We fall down before them and worship them. In the intellectual field, we will not let go of that which we have proved to be useless. We go on trying to excuse ourselves for our stupidity by becoming more intellectual, while the very thing that would release us from our self-imposed bondage is to investigate the law of being. But this is never considered because it is not according to the orthodox practice. All that orthodoxy has done for us is to perpetuate our ignorance from one generation to another. The germ that gave rise to the Christian religion has been submerged in sanctimonious formalities and is no longer visible as a guide to humanity as intended by the man who taught it, and so the world is still worshiping something that it does not know. We are accustomed to look upon the world through our physical senses, and from these experiences conceptions are created. But true conceptions are secured only by spiritual insight, the understanding of the law operating within ourselves. And to obtain this understanding, the consciousness must be directed to the kingdom of heaven within. There we will find we are made in the image and likeness of God, realizing that His attributes are also ours. It only remains for us to use them. In concentrating upon an ideal, we have to make it so clear that the mental action becomes a form of contention. That is an automatic action that takes place in the inner or subjective, or otherwise known as the subconscious. The universal mind is always pressing forward through the individual, and in fact, we can only think in the universal, not out of it as we appear to do or think we do. We find that we have in our minds a mechanism that tends to work upon any subject or object we give attention to. It seems to attract all the material around the central point or idea concentrated upon and works along in perfect sequence, bringing facts together that are allied and dissecting other information for further attention. So accurate is this mechanism, it can work out a problem in a fraction of the time that we spend upon it consciously. All we have to do is to consciously give it attention in all its phases and let the inner man do the rest. The inner or subjective is the universal wherein is that predetermined knowing how to bring things about. As I told you in my last lecture, the intelligence in action is that predetermined knowing that is behind the manifestation of all thought or ideas held in the consciousness. What the consciousness is aware of, the intelligence, the knowing how brings it about. That is why we should lose sight of the personal self when steeped in the idea. The personal self is always a hindrance to the expression of the universal. When the personal self is too much aware of itself, either in the form of egoism, fear, both are equally frustrating. A musician, actor, or orator, to be great must be lost in his art, so as to be linked up with the universal from whence all genius comes, drawing from it insight and knowledge and feeling impossible of attainment in any other way. We draw from the universal intelligence, that knowing how, insight, and knowledge necessary for the expression of the idea that we hold in our minds. All ideas that are so held by contention attract the substance to manifest in the physical expression. Therefore, by this rule you can wrest the secrets from heaven and earth, for knowledge is essentially drawn to the mind that is trained in this way. As we translate into character and circumstance the ideas held in the mind that knows no opposition, We thus grow out of our limited state into that glorious expression of that which we are in reality, one with the cause of all things. When we realize great thoughts, we shall experience the feeling that corresponds with great thoughts. We will then appreciate the value of divine thinking when we see the intelligence in action, in outpicturing our thoughts and form in exact correspondence to that which we created within. The fact that we can think and meditate upon the great intelligence is proof that the intelligence is expressing itself through us. And the more we realize and recognize this intelligence, the more it will manifest in and through us in our affairs. It is this great predetermined all-knowing that makes us aware of itself, because nothing can exist to us except by the fact that we become aware of it. When our consciousness can be centered upon or identified with the object of its attention, it absorbs the object of its attention as the body absorbs food. Thus we become aware, and as we understand that the physical is but the expression of the spiritual, we become aware of the omnipotence of thought, and by this means we are able to harness all natural resources. We shall see through our own experiences that concentration leads to contention, and contention leads into intuition, bringing the universal into the individual conscious realm here and now. Intuition often solves problems that are beyond the grasp of the individual reasoning. Conclusions are arrived at without the aid of experience or memory. The problem is worked out in the universal or subjective, which reveals the answer we are looking for. This intuition can be cultivated or developed by confidence and patient practice. When it comes, to give it the royal welcome, and it will come again and again, but if ignored or neglected, it will make its visit few and far between. Intuition is best developed by the convincing proof that all is infinite, and there can be nothing else. And as we identify ourselves logically and faithfully with the Source, we develop a silence that is continually active. I cannot put into better words, and if you can catch the meaning, you will soon experience a silence that is ever active, ever aware of itself. It is so vast that the human mind cannot comprehend it fully, but it can merge with it. A mind that is not capable of entering into this silence is one that is full of movements antagonistic to itself, for that which is antagonistic in oneself must be reversing the process of the divine nature in itself. This weakness shows itself in lack of self-control when the mind is primarily engulfed in fears, hatred, envy, jealousies, and antagonisms of all kind. There is a type of person that is antagonistic to everything. The idea, as it were, no matter what government, I am against the government. If you find that you cannot be alone with yourself, there is a deep-rooted error that must be rooted out. If you have phobias, fears, envies, jealousies, hatreds, which are antagonistic to your divine nature, you can never enter into this silence. You will always be seeking some outside attraction, and they become the net into which you are caught up, and in this way you are trying to escape from your confusion. But if you become aware that you are trying to escape, and why you are doing so, and discern your thoughts and emotions, you will dissolve them, and thus be free from their entanglements. The truth will then establish itself in the mind that is free from conflict and confusion. There is no other way of explaining this. It may seem deep to you at first, but as you begin to see clearly, you will find the means and method to suit yourself, and thus free yourself from your self-imposed prison which you have created. You will find every obstacle conquered, every victory gained gives you more faith, more power, greater ability, and your success will be determined by your mental attitude. It is easy for the mind that is freed by the truth to seek the silence in union where the divine for truth dissolves the error. It is good to remember this, that a definite purpose sets in motion the invisible world to find the material to serve that purpose. Aim to give service instead of seeking reward or possession. Premature success cannot be maintained unless it is earned. We get only what we give. The law of compensation eventually brings about an exact equilibrium to those who try and get without giving. We must find a true source of power, which is the source of our own being, not the symbols of power such as wealth, position, etc. When the true source is known, we are no longer interested in shams and pretension. Seek ye first the kingdom within, and all other things shall be added unto you. On the outside rages the clash of arms and the din of social problems, the world of effects mainly from man's ignorance. We do not close our eyes to these, but see them in their true light, for they also can be changed from within and not from without. With this understanding we can commune with our higher self, the God of power, the God of love, the God of wisdom. This is the practical application of the adept and the way to freedom, individually and collectively. Bend your ears, listen to wise words, study to understand their charm. Ever keep them in mind, all ready for your lips. I am still teaching you my truth, that you may rely on the eternal. But have I not written them for you already, instructions about knowledge, that you might understand them for yourselves, and answer all inquirers? Proverbs 22:17 through 21. So mote it be. End of lecture. Chapter 11. We have been given dominion. The great difficulty with most people in this world is that they have not got a true understanding of things as they really are. They live in the illusion that matter and mind are two separate things. Consequently, they are forever trying to solve their difficulties through the physical, while not recognizing the fact that mind and matter, or the spiritual and physical, are ingredients of one single system. This is the great truth that we have proved in these lectures, and when we have fully realized it, we will recognize at once that this truth is not the product of our imagination, but a living reality. Not only have we proved this through our studies in these classes, but also it has been proved along well-known scientific lines. There is no longer any room for the dualism that has haunted philosophy throughout the centuries. It was Jesus who saw this truth so clearly, and he demonstrated it. Although philosophers have been philosophizing for centuries on the teaching of the Master, few have really grasped the great significance of the materializing power of the thought power Jesus used. It is only through the understanding acquired through these teachings that we can grasp fully the magnificent realization that dawns upon us with such force that we are almost spellbound when we fully recognize what it means to ourselves here and now. The mistaken dualism of mind and matter has confused so many mental scientists and truth students, including Christian scientists, when they try to prove that matter does not exist. Healing can never be truly accomplished by denying matter or conditions that may exist. We must see that the condition, which may cause us mental anxiety, is created by a belief, otherwise by thoughts that become active in the inner realm as a result of our belief, or that which we react to in the external, thus supporting the phenomena or condition which we believe to be true. It is not the denial of matter or the denial of a condition that heals. This is just blind ignorance, which may or may not give us temporary relief. It is through the understanding of the fundamental truth that we can consciously act upon matter and change or dissolve or create a condition that gives us power over matter or any condition that may exist. In the Bible it tells us that we have been given dominion over all things, and although this has been little understood, it still remains a fundamental truth that can be proved by anyone who applies the law. When you see that an error exists in any calculation, you do not accept that error. You know that there is an error, and you set about correcting it. Yet the extraordinary thing is that we accept an error that exists in the human mind, body, or circumstance to be a reality. You are the perfect expression of the law of God, as the correct sum is the expression of the law of mathematics. I want you to see this clearly, so that you will no longer be confused in your mind in regard to the phenomena you see before you. When you understand the law of life as you understand the law of electricity or mathematics, you can practice a system that enables you to control matter through the natural law of the consciousness that exists in everyone. Everything is the result of this natural law, whether you create a condition that is foreign to your true nature, or whether you allow the natural law of God to operate for your benefit by recognizing this law to be in yourself. That is, what you are conscious of tends to manifest whether you fear it or whether you have faith in it. But if you are caught up in your fears or caught up in your faith, you are still not free. Freedom only comes when the true state is realized. This is the scientific basis upon which we can truly free ourselves from all conditions that hamper us. No matter how much you like to philosophize or try other means, you will fail if you are unaware of this law. The reason why most people cannot understand is because they think that matter is fundamental, and the effects which they see expressed are permanent. There is nothing permanent in matter. All is in a continual flux or change, and change is the only thing that seems permanent. And this change originated in the inner world of our thought action. There is no use in denying the effects we see. We must find the cause behind the effect. You cannot change an effect by ignorantly denying it. You must discern it and know it. Then and only then can you correct the error that is externalized in an effort by correcting it in the thought world or consciousness. An idea in the mind of God has the predetermined knowing, or the intelligence behind it. This predetermined knowing knows the end, because the end is in the beginning. But with man, he seldom realizes that this same law exists in himself. Although he is unaware of the ways and means of this predetermined knowing, yet it exists as the universal law of life. Whatever the consciousness is aware of, the intelligence will fulfill. While God's ideas are perfect, man's ideas are more often imperfect. Yet this should not alarm us, for only through experience can we learn to operate this law of life as we operate the law of electricity or the law of mathematics. These discoveries are only natural and inevitable to those who understand the significance of the facts which the Master Jesus revealed to the world in his teaching. Through his parables and his works, even those with medium intellect can comprehend his teaching when freed from dogma and fear. And as we become more acquainted with his great scientific mind, so will we realize that he is still the world's greatest leader in modern thought. Modern science and modern thinking today reveal this truth all too plainly to the consternation of those who are still stuck to the antiquated and erroneous fiction of the unscientific and the belief of a devil and hell as depicted in Dante's Inferno. We only play a part in the great scheme of the evolution according to nature and intention of the infinite creative principle. Through the instrument of mind and action, divine thought, operating through man as a means of bringing about the direct expression of the infinite. And there can be no other mind but his, and no power but his, and no direction but his. We are assured that the ultimate result must be perfection. Man may for a time please himself, but in the end he can only please God. Thus he finds through action and experience. For the law relentlessly brings upon him what he sows, so does he reap. And ultimately there is no other way but to please God, and we find the way through the man of Galilee. For the infinite did express himself through one so that all could follow in his footsteps, and this way is the way for all. For Jesus was an international figure. It is only ignorant man that has made sectional denominations out of his teaching by making claims that have no basis of truth in them. The various beliefs create only confusion and separation, and are therefore entirely false. The statement, "The kingdom of heaven is within us," is proof that only within can we find this pearl of great price, and not through any outside organization or system. So we learn by experience as we play our part, consciously or unconsciously, producing health or sickness, success or failure, according to the nature of ideas. In fact, ideas are the impelling force behind our conduct. They cause us to act in accordance with the idea that dominates the mind. Thus we outpicture our ideas into life. When we get lost in our ideal, we express ourselves through our ideal, and we become our ideal. Therefore it is necessary to discern our ideal and the motive behind it. Then we are not caught up in the net of our ideal, but are free to watch our ideal take shape according to the law of which we have become aware. Whatever the consciousness is aware of, the intelligence, the predetermined knowing, exists in the universal mind will bring it about. God himself, while differentiated, still remains undifferentiated. Although God becomes the things he makes, he still remains a creator, eternal and ever-present. To claim all that the Creator has in store for us, we must practice what Jesus said in similar words to these. We must love the Lord our God with all our hearts, with all our mind and with all our strength, and we must love our neighbor as ourselves. For surely our neighbor is ourselves in the light of the truth that God alone lives, and there is only one. The infinite, to be infinite, there must be the only one, and all must be the infinite. Therefore, we prove to ourselves the simple law of love your neighbors is the true expression of God in us. No matter in what capacity we are engaged, this great law gives us the perfect life because it is in accordance with the divine expression, the only reality. In our experience, we find that when ideas are created through ignorantly reacting to outside destructive conditions, they tend to outpicture themselves in us. If our reaction is to hate, we create this in ourselves. If our reaction is anger, so we create this in ourselves. If our reaction is jealousy, we create this in ourselves. Our freedom, again, lies in what Jesus said. Love your enemies, return good for evil, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them who despitefully use you and persecute you, so that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. What clearer statement can you have of the law than this? This is not a code of ethics, but the law of life itself. In this we see what is meant. Instead of being molded to this world, have your mind renewed and so transformed in nature, able to make out what the will of God is, what is good and acceptable to him and perfect. The belief in an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is as out of date as the belief that the earth is flat. We see then how important it is for us to watch carefully and discern what our thoughts and reactions. Are they molded to the outside world, or are they molded to that which is true? When we realize that the inner self is identified with the great infinite self which is behind all creation, and see this externalized in ourselves, we recognize an unlimited, inexhaustible power guided by love and wisdom. And as we dwell upon this instead of the outer, we are able to change the outer in accordance with what is true. Thus we gain for ourselves health, success, and happiness as a natural sequence. For no eyes have yet seen or ears heard of all the good things that God has prepared for those who love Him. As our thought world changes, so much all outward conditions change accordingly. Let us see clearly the external world is an exact replica of the inside world. And there is no power on earth that can alter this law. It is the supreme law that exists throughout the whole universe, from the highest to the lowest. Our subjective self is the universal self, the only difference being in degree. They differ only as a drop of water differs from the ocean. When the drop is in the ocean, it is the ocean. They are the same in kind and quality, while the universal self produces the individual self in the natural form out of the universal substance. So does the individual self produce his or her own condition and circumstance out of the same substance. Perhaps you have not yet realized the full significance of this law, yet day by day you practice and experience this law. Only when the great revealing power of this law becomes a reality to us do we wake out of our dream state and truly live. It is the recognition of this tremendous fact that places us in touch with the omnipotent and omniscient qualities of the universal self in ourselves. With this understanding, we can create ideas in the mind in which no limit can be placed upon its activities. When we understand prayer in the true sense, we will see that the results are the exact operation of the law, and that there is nothing religious or mysterious about it. True prayer is the creating of an idea in the inner world with the understanding that it will be produced in the outer. But before your prayer is answered, the method must be known and understood. We must close our mind to the outer, so that nothing from the outside can interfere with the creation of the idea as we hold our relationship to the creative principle. Jesus said, in other words, go into your closet and close the door to the senses that react to the outside world. When we deliberately begin to realize and recognize the tremendous power we have within ourselves, we will know that we are made in the image and likeness of God. The Spirit, or real power, is the power of manifestation, for God is Spirit, and has bestowed upon us all His attributes, so that we might have abundance of health, happiness, wisdom, and love. And all things that we ask we shall receive, provided we do not ask amiss. Now we have received the Spirit, not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit that comes from God, that we may understand what God bestows upon us. 1 Corinthians 2:12. So mote it be. End of lecture. Chapter 12. Life Everlasting. Truly I tell you, he who listens to my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life. He has already passed from death across to life. For the Father hath life in himself, so he too granted the Son to have life in himself. Here I wish to speak to you upon this all-inspiring truth. God is life, and life is God. There is no other living being. It is God who lives in us, and he makes us alive, not only here upon earth, but grants us eternal life in himself. Man believed that death was the end, but the barrier was created by man himself through his ignorance of the truth of life. Now the Master said, I tell you truly, he who listens to my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life. How significant these words are to us. The cloud of ignorance was broken by Jesus returning to show himself. He showed that there was no death. Death was but man's ignorance of the truth of eternal life. Ignorance dies hard, and still millions of people have not yet grasped the great truth that life can never die or fade away. Life is continually unfolding into greater expression of itself and creates the forms for this purpose, and the greatest of these forms upon earth is the human body. By now we have all grasped the fact that material substance is a modified form of invisible substance that underlies and supports and interpenetrates it. Life has individualized itself in the human form. The individualized spirit is eternal, and this is what Jesus came to prove and did prove. And since then it has been proven millions of times by the passing of every human being from the earth plane. Jesus took upon himself the burden of our greatest sin, our unbelief. Yet there is some excuse for man's unbelief because he had been born into a world ignorant of the truth of the eternal life. So man would not believe what he could not see. But what he did see was the effect of an inner cause. Yet man had not grown sufficiently to understand this, so he lost himself in his ignorance, which was his greatest sin, and which brought him his greatest misery. Jesus told us the great truth, for as the Father hath life in himself, so too he granted the Son to have life in himself. Here we see that the Son is the child of God. Now a child of the living God can never die, for we are that life coming from its source, that eternal source. So this life becomes a spirit, the spirit that is consciousness and grows out of the body, glorious and immortal. This spirit is birthless and deathless, and I am that spirit. We are all that spirit, for we can be nothing else. If we were not, then God could not be infinite. The Eternal formed me first of his creation, first of all his works. I was fashioned in the earliest ages, from the very first when earth began. I was born when there were no abysses, when there were no fountains full of water. He sunk the bases of the mountains, ere the hills existed before I was born, when earth and fields were not created, nor the very first clods of the world. When he set the heavens up, I was there. When he drew the vault over the abyss. When he made the clouds firm overhead. When he fixed the fountains of the deep. When he set the boundaries of the sea. When he laid the foundations for the earth. I was with him then, his foster child. I was his delight day after day, playing in his presence constantly, playing here and there over his world, finding my delight in humankind. Proverbs 8:22-31. I am the Eternal One, birthless, deathless, and you are one with me. God is the one consciousness permeating the whole of humanity. Our consciousness goes beyond all creation into the realm of immortality. When we become aware of this divine truth, we see beyond this world and behind all of its effects. The Bible is a statement of universal law of that which is in the realm of the invisible, as well as that which is in the realm of the visible. It deals with facts of the spiritual nature as well as facts of the physical nature. It shows how the spirit is involved, and this involution precedes evolution. The perpetual urge onward of the spirit through the form it creates for this purpose. Therefore, God has involved himself through all of his creation, including man. The beginning is not separated from the end. The beginning is God. The end is God. For there is only one spirit involved, and evolving out of the form it is created for its own self-expression. The great truth that we must become aware of is that God infinite, the Eternal One, timeless, birthless, deathless, limitless, ageless, the one and only cause, has individualized himself, and we are that individualization. The one spirit passing into greater expression of itself. Therefore we realize that it is the infinite life expressing itself now. And this now is the eternal now, not separate but individualizing itself by itself and through itself. The form in which the expression takes place dissolves into the substance from which it comes, while the essence, the spirit, remains for further expression into a higher level. God formed man in his own image and likeness. In this passage in Genesis, it is not the form or body that is spoken of, but the spirit, the first creative cause that is behind all creation, the animating life that is within the outer or material form. This is the only conscious reality, the thinking entity with power to create. The fact is that we are the individualization of the Father, Mother God, and Jesus again makes this plain to the woman at the well. God is spirit, and again makes it plain by saying, the kingdom of heaven is within you, meaning that the kingdom of the innermost, or spiritual, is within, the earthly body is the outer. Therefore we see that the spirit, the innermost, is the real self, God, who preceded this stupendous work of creation and will remain after the visible creation dissolves away, which includes the physical body. Life alone lives, and this is the all-important truth for the conception of ourselves as being separate from the divine. Life is the root of all our misery, our unbelief. Jesus again makes it plain when he said, He who believes in my words and in him who sent me has already passed from death to life, meaning that death is but the illusion of the mortal sense, and life is the truth of the everlasting. There is the universal psychic medium which makes up the soul, and which is the nucleus of the form to become consolidated on the plane of the concrete or material. This psychic substance obeys the movements of divine thought. This soul substance is the realm of potential forms to be, and is the connecting link between spirit and matter, and is the vehicle through which the individualized spirit expresses itself. This cosmic element is referred to in the Bible as water. It is the distributive medium in which the individualized life produces the human form in the outer or visible plane. Emerson said, "The body the soul doth make." Therefore, life creates the form for its own self-expression. Life alone lives, thus proving our oneness with life. When the individualized life withdraws from the outer, it still manifests in the inner or soul substance, while the outer or physical form dissolves into the substance from which it came. Therefore, as we think and act in the soul, we take with us our memories and experiences gained upon earth. Again, I will repeat some words of the Master to make this plan more plain to you. God is spirit. I and the Father are one. He who has seen me has seen the Father. It is the Spirit within that doeth the work. The kingdom of heaven is within you. I am the life. All this goes to prove that the consciousness that is life in us and is us is ever unfolding into more glorious expression of itself, consciousness expanding as it recedes into the inner, into the greater world. The earth was without form and void. In this state, cause alone existed. Then cause operated, and the effects began to take form. The same operation pertains to mankind, and man will always have a form coinciding with the plane of substance in which he is manifesting. And as his senses are attuned to this substance and plane of manifestation, so will his reactions be. Yet that which receives these impressions is eternal, and ever expanding into that which it really is, infinite spirit. Therefore the beginning and the end are one. The inner substance is called mind stuff, out of which the soul and other forms are created. The one is but a complement of the other, spirit, soul, and body. The Master, when instructing Nicodemus, pointed out that the new birth results from the interaction of spirit and water, water symbolizing the psychic or soul substance, especially emphasizing the fact that the flesh had no share in the operation. The flesh, the outer, had no say. The Master stressed the weakness of the flesh, the nothingness of it, and the essentialness of water, the soul substance, the inner world. Here are the Master's words. What is born of the flesh is flesh, and what is born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not wonder at my telling you, you must all be born from above. The wind blows where it will. You can hear the sound, but you never know where it cometh or where it goeth. It is the same with everyone who is born of the Spirit. Recognize no one as your Father upon earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven. Our Father who art in heaven. Again showing how the recognition of the Spirit becomes the only reality. This was always uppermost in the Master's mind, for he knew this to be a fact. Born of the Spirit means eternal life, and we are all born of the Spirit. But few can grasp this mighty truth, because blind orthodoxy has not yet fully realized the truth of the Master's words, that man is immortal. The inner light symbolizes the Spirit, and this was the light of man. I am the light of the world. This light of man can never be extinguished. It is the expression of infinite love, wisdom, and power, and comes forth in greater glory as it recedes into the inner, from where it first came. When mankind realizes this, the whole world will change, for the world will know that there is no death in the eternal life. The source of our being is God, and once we become aware, we know that our Father is the eternal, infinite God. Thus the consciousness of man becomes aware that it is the consciousness of God, the Christ that has risen. The man Adam is the earth man, the body of flesh that has no power. It does not limit the spirit of man, except when man believeth he is but flesh, and this is the illusion of the mortal senses. Until we pierce behind the veil of outward appearances and see the living Christ, the divine creative spirit as our real self, we will always suffer sorrow in our ignorance. But when the great truth is realized, then there is great joy, and our selfish sorrow is no more. I can remember well when I loved dearly was about to pass, she asked me to repeat the hymn, Lead, kindly light, amid the encircling gloom, lead thou me on. I do not wish to see one step enough for me, lead me on. As I was repeating it, a serene, lovely smile covered her face. The agony of pain had gone, and I knew she had left her earthly tenement for a lovelier abode. And since then, I have seen her and spoken to her many times. Her words are always these: "It is glorious here, glorious. Thou art the ocean, I am the wave. Thou art the fire, I am the flame. Thou art the father, I am the child. Thou art the beloved, I am the lover. Thou art the lover, I am the beloved. Thou art the music, I am the song. Thou art the spirit, and I am one with thee. Now I know I will always be." Murdo, MacDonald, Bayne. So mote it be. End of lesson. Chapter 13. The Creative Principle. The creative principle is behind all creation, including mankind. When we mention the creative principle, it may seem to be something far off, something that is nebulous. But when we begin to think about the creative principle and ask ourselves the pertinent question, what are the possibilities of this creative power? Our minds encompass the universe and all the mighty power behind it, and all the intelligence that is operating through it. And when we dwell upon the impression it makes on our minds, and then let our minds accept the great possibilities that the creative principle means to us, we establish something in the consciousness that was not there before. We have already seen that the creative principle must be inherent in us for the simple reason that there cannot be anything else that can possibly create. When our minds have grasped this great significant fact, let us use this creative power in our own lives, not haphazardly, but with true understanding. For it is this that makes all things possible. When we dwell upon this great truth, we begin to develop ourselves. What we gaze upon comes forth. When we dwell upon the unlimited possibilities of the creative principle, the wisdom, the power and affection expressed by it, we begin to weave these into our minds. Now let us look at what is the habitual state of our minds. We weave into our minds the impression that come from without. Our reactions in fear and envy and jealousy, and all the emotions and fears that arise in our daily life in regard to our economic and social existence. This is the pattern of our minds, is it not? And it is this pattern that holds us in subjection to the material world and makes us slave to our mortal senses. We all know by now that thought is creative. We create in the inner world of ours by the power of our thoughts and emotions. And the natural sequence of the law must produce in the outer what we create in the inner. If then we weave into our minds the pattern of the possibilities of the creative principles, this will produce for us according to the nature of our realization. When we recognize the nature of our creative faculties completely with the vision of our real spiritual state, with this understanding we can overcome the limitations of our mortal senses through the raising of our individual experiences, thus not only raising our own standards, but the whole social structure of the world. Most people are continually blaming their conditions upon someone else. We must learn that the abundant life is not gained through the result of man's physical efforts, but by man's direction of thought and the power that creates all things. And we must learn how to use it effectively and efficiently. By the rising tide of our conscious aspiration, the level will be reached, which will bring peace and prosperity to the whole world, as well as solving our own immediate problems. Civilization has been built up more or less through the unconscious application of the creative laws. Is it not then reasonable to assume that the conscious application of the law by each individual who is awakened to the latent creative power within will lead to a higher order of living, and a desired condition will be established in the individual life? Jesus discovered that the ability to use the creative principle was to associate himself with the creative principle. When we read the biography of some of the great men and women of the world, we come across the same quality, which enables us to identify ourselves with the creative principle that is behind all creation. People like Voltaire, Disraeli, Lincoln, Edison, and others also find in the power of thought lies hidden the source of cause and effect. By this means they lifted themselves above the common level of the masses, and revealing in their own experience to the world that the individual is capable of creating a life more abundant. They not only enriched their own lives, but enriched all others as well. Our creative power depends upon our realization of the power of the Spirit, and we must clearly understand our relation to it. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Here we see the clear description of the fact that matter is mind materialized. The matter perceived this fundamental truth and used it. We can also discover the methods by which our needs are supplied, by which wisdom is obtained, by which error is dissolved away, and by which a healthy and successful life can be accomplished. These possibilities are inherent within all individuals. Their use is determined by the degree of understanding. In the beginning, we do not see clearly how to put in operation the creative power, but through practice and experience, we gain a greater understanding of the law. Want, limitation, failure, and unhappiness are the evidence of the misuse of the law of the creative principle. Yet the proper application of the law is simple. Those that wait upon the law shall inherit the earth. Psalm 37. Commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. Whosoever trusteth in the Lord, happy is he. Proverbs 16. Wonderful possibilities are opened to us through the understanding of the Master. Jesus said, It is not I that doeth the work, but the Father who liveth in me. He doeth the work. We must take the exact same position. This is complying with the law of the all-originating mind, which brings about results. For it is impossible for us to think outside the all-originating mind. For when we create the ideas, the intelligence of the mind will flow to fulfill what we consciously hold before it. We see that there is no need to struggle. Struggle always results from our reaction to conditions. We struggle to overcome the pattern they weave in our minds. Struggle is frustration, for we only create more and more of the condition we struggle against. Our personal effort must turn into pure action, pure thought, thought that is not subject to lack of faith or full of fear. The double-minded creature need not think that he will get anything from the Lord. Pure thought does not rise from reaction. Pure thought is the result of the awareness of our oneness with the creative principle, knowing that this creative principle is active in us. The Lord is with you, while ye be with him. 2 Corinthians 15. Pure thought is like pure love. It does not demand an object for its expression. It is always there, and when an object presents itself, it goes out towards it. Love is life, and life is creative, even when it is not necessarily expressing itself in form. But to understand this, you must understand what form is, and the source of its being, and first go through the personal effort to arrive at pure action and pure thought, coming from the creative principle of life within, and not from the conditions that are without. We must not be caught up in the opinions of what life is. We must approach it with the knowledge that it is, not what it is. In this way, the individual consciousness becomes wider. So will the presence, the life, express itself through the consciousness that knows that there is no beginning and no ending, but that life is complete in itself. For this is the source of pure thought. Life, the presence, is creation. You cannot define it with words such as happiness, unhappiness, success or failure, lack or plenty, health or ill health. In life, the presence, the creative principle, is creation, is movement, and in it there is manifestation and non-manifestation. The creative principle, the presence, the life, remains complete irrespective of manifestation or differentiation. The finite is the expression of the infinite. The infinite is formless, yet the infinite is within and beyond all form, and is the creator of all form. This same principle is the creative power in us, and the power we create with in all planes of existence. Life is consciousness, and when individualized, becomes the consciousness of the individual, making the individual self-conscious. When the individual has become aware of the presence in himself as the all-creative principle, he has bridged the gap between himself and the omnipresence. This is the purpose of life. Everything that is manifestation conceals the creative principle in itself, and when this creative principle has become concentrated in the individual consciousness, then nature has fulfilled itself. This is not a theory, but a living reality, and neither is it an opinion or a product of the imagination. The proof of your living is the reality of it. I am speaking from a knowledge of life's operation beyond the material plane. These words are from the Spirit who is speaking to me. The whole destiny of the presence, the life, is to create individual expression of itself in the self-consciousness entity who becomes aware of himself or herself as a life. Life itself becomes self-conscious in the developed, awakened, concentrated individual. There can be no separation between you and the life itself, between you and the infinite life. If you were separate, then the infinite could not be infinite. There could be no such thing as infinity, nor could there be any absolute being. With this understanding, you will readily see that you must see in others what you want to establish in yourself. Jesus said, "Do not condemn, lest ye be condemned." What right have we then to criticize anyone anyhow? Take the plank out of your own eye, and you will see better how to take the splinter out of your brother's eye. And thou sayest in thine heart, My power and the might of mine hand hath gotten me this wealth. But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant, which he sware unto thy fathers, as it is this day. Deuteronomy 8:17 and 18. The next phase of the law is that if we desire the impersonal power, we must become as humble as the impersonal power itself, expressing itself through its most humble creation. Unless ye become as a little child, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. It is the law of God in mankind that brings about every good thing and attracts to one the best in life. The flow of the divine life to us never ceases for one moment, and as we become aware of this flow, it becomes greater in our lives. But if our thoughts are not in harmony with it, they cling to us and finally manifest in our bodies and circumstances as fear, doubt, disease, frustration, and unhappiness. The physician may not diagnose the case correctly, so he gives it a fancy name, which has been manufactured for various ills. So the individual dwells upon it and increases the trouble. What is needed is wisdom and an understanding of the law. We build our bodies by subconscious thought and take the substance from our surroundings to do so. Our subconscious thought constructs both our etheric and our physical bodies, and these are what we have subconsciously imagined. Without mind, there would be no body. There would be no individual mind in our present state of consciousness. They are both complementary to each other, just as our bodies grow by absorbing physical and etheric nourishment. So our minds absorb mental nourishment of the mind substance of the universe, and this can never cease. Our mind is a developing substance and draws its power from the universal mind, and this development will never end. We shall ultimately cease to be conscious of time and space, only of eternity, a state of consciousness apart from time and space. Our minds in this state shall encompass the universe, and we will have conquered all things. We will acquire this knowledge by the conscious use of the creative law, which will reveal to us a deeper significance than the mere intrinsic value of a material possession. They will represent to us the extent of our spiritual knowledge and our ability to collaborate with the Creator in all things. We will see that the whole world has come from the invisible and has been formed according to the divine design in the mind of the Creator. God Himself has made it plain, for ever since the world was created, His invisible nature, His everlasting power and divine being have been quite perceptible in what He has made. Romans 1:20. Therefore, our success depends upon the success we have in revealing the relationship between ourselves and our creative source of power, and in explaining the method by which the creative laws inherent in this source can be simply understood and used by all. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. Revelations 21:6. So mote it be. End of lesson. Chapter 14. Intelligence, the active principle of life. I have said before to you that there is a predetermined knowing of the infinite that knows how. This is a great and vast subject and requires much more than we can explain in one lesson. It is important to us inasmuch as it is always active around us and in us, and is responsive to our conscious thought as well as our unconscious thought. And this is the great truth that we have to understand. Everywhere we see this intelligent operation in our bodies, in our affairs, in the world and beyond it. Everywhere this intelligence is actively fulfilling the divine decrees, and this is very important to us when we realize that we are also divine. The law is no respecter of persons. It is impartial and impersonal, and we would not have to otherwise when we begin to think about it. And this intelligence is the expression behind the law. Whatever the consciousness is aware of, the intelligence fulfills. The Master Jesus was the greatest exponent of the law, although there were others before him, and some after him, who also demonstrated the law. He was undoubtedly the greatest exponent of the operation of it, and by his understanding of it, he was able to show how it works. In his time there was no electricity. It was unknown to man then, yet his demonstrations were sufficient to prove the law of life. I am going to use the simile of electricity to explain to you what Jesus knew in regard to the law of life. When you switch on the light, you expect the light. The electricity is there all the time, waiting to manifest in the form of light because you have directed it to manifest in that way. The intelligence within the electricity performs the miracle according to the channel or form through which it flows. Electricity is impersonal as regards to the form in which it manifests. Life is just the same. It is impersonal also, and it will manifest in the form in which it is directed. The intelligence within life performs a miracle. If you can grasp this great truth, you will have gained an understanding that will aid you throughout eternity. Life does not only manifest in the physical plane, it manifests in all planes of action, and no matter in which plane of action, it is the life that is expressing itself. Our surroundings are just as they appear to be to us mentally, through the body we are inhabiting for the time being, yet we know that life must be manifesting in a greater sphere of action. To assume that life is limited to the ponderable substance of which we are aware of is to limit the infinite in us who is expressing himself in omnipresence. To ignorantly deny that life does exist in the invisible around us is not only stupid but limits the infinite, and this, as we know, is an impossibility. For the infinite to be infinite, his life, pure spirit, must be everywhere simultaneously, thus disposing of time and space, which is the measurement of the mortal sense and limitation. The earth is your world in the physical body, but it ceases to be the world to you when you leave the physical body and function in the etheric body, because you then sense your surrounding through the etheric substance. Consciousness is continually unfolding, and this is a never-ending process. We all progress from one stage of expression to another through the ages, yet it is life, that is the ever-present and eternal now. I am the life, individualized life consciousness unfolding through the different orders of substance. The infinite mind is one whole and cannot be divided. We must move and live and progress in that mind, for there is no other possible place. And because we cannot be outside it, we must be in it and of it. Under whatever name this overruling presence is known, God, the Almighty, the Father, the universal mind, the cosmic mind, it always stirs our emotions. And when we approach the presence, let us assume that attitude of reverent worship. This is the secret of opening up to the ineffable, the inscrutable. We must be careful not to limit ourselves by trying to define what it is. We must approach this unbounded reservoir of wisdom, love, and power as the everlasting, eternal, and omnipresent living being, deathless, birthless, limitless, and by identifying ourselves with it, we give expression to it, and in whatever form it is manifesting, it will express itself in all its power and glory according to the capacity of that form it expresses. A 1,000-watt lamp will express much more light than a 100-watt lamp. Our wattage is our awareness of the source of our own being, to which we can go direct and draw from it according to our capacity to receive. If your minds are bound by the paralyzing suggestions that come from the crude thinking of the race, suggestions that are accepted without question, suggestions that become concrete concepts in your mind, then you are bound and limited from the start. If your minds are deeply affected by fear, worry, infirmity, inferiority, etc., you will readily see that this will bring about much unhappiness. What you must grasp is that mind is a universal substance that manifests the intelligence from within according to your awareness of it, thus creating the means by which the intelligence will work for you. Modern science has revealed the sound and light are simply different intensities of motion. Light can be turned into sound, and sound can be turned into light. Behind all this, the intelligence expressing itself in whatever form we direct it. So are the thoughts of mankind just different intensities of motion. We can, by thinking, change the vibration so that we can express love or hate, sorrow, happiness, success or failure. Perhaps some of the new students may not yet have grasped the meaning of the term that all is mind materialized. Now we know that ponderable matter can be dissolved into invisibility. When it has gone into invisibility, we know not where it has gone. In fact, it has not gone anywhere. It is right here. We have not destroyed one particle of the substance. It has only changed its form. But behind that change there is intelligence, an intelligence that knows how, and this is the predetermined knowing of the infinite in operation. What you see externally is but the effect of this intelligence expressing the cause from within. If you are continually reacting to the effects of what you are seeing on the surface, and blind to the cause within, then you are living in the illusion of the mortal sense. As mind substance is the basis of everything, and out of this substance everything must come, we readily see that we cannot be separate from it, and what affects one must affect all. although we are not at first aware of it, for we are all functioning in the same mind. In the ether of space there are vibrations of different wavelengths, all vibrating at the same time, and although they do not interfere with each other, we can tune into these according to the wavelength in our own consciousness, similar to the wireless, which we are more or less conversant with. We see then that we are surrounded with various wavelengths of vibration to which we can tune into, and the intelligence will express them according to the state of our own consciousness. The intelligence is impersonal, it is neither good or bad, and when we see this clearly, we see that we do not have to push away the bad to get the good, or try to get the good to keep out the bad, because neither exists in the intelligence. Just as electricity cannot be said to be bad when it kills someone and good when it gives us light and power, the fact remains that we consciously or unconsciously use the law pertaining to it wisely or unwisely. When we use the law of the intelligence wisely, we realize the presence of God in our affairs. This eliminates from our minds all fears, all cravings, all limitation. When the cause of fear, limitation, etc. is discerned, it fades away and reality takes its place. One is real and the other is not, for reality alone exists. This has always been the power behind the adepts, the prophets and the masters, and the same power is now with us if we will grasp the truth of this law and use it. No one can tell you what God is. We cannot describe the indescribable, but we do know that He enters our lives when we identify ourselves with Him. This is the truth that sets us free. If we burden ourselves with false beliefs, superstitions, and illusions, we hinder His true expression in us. Then by discerning the cause of our limitation, they fall away from us. By understanding what is not true, we arrive at that which is. If I say to you that God is love, God is wisdom, God is truth, you readily believe these things. But if you do not discern that which is false, you only bring these truths into a prison of your own making, so you are still not free. If you hold on to false beliefs, you will still perpetuate them into your life, or if you follow the dictates of another, you will be caught up in his prison, even if you may leave your own. It is only by thinking this out clearly to the end for yourself that you can be free. If you allow tradition, opinions, beliefs, antagonisms to affect your thinking, then you cannot think clearly. If you believe what another has said, or what you have read, and you accept this without thinking it out for yourself, then you cannot know the source of your being. By thinking clearly to the end only can this be yours, and you must do it yourself. You must be entirely free from antagonism, belief, superstition, tradition, fashion, and influences that come from without, when you are one-pointed in regard to life and the source of it. And by identifying yourself with it, you will readily see how to discern that which is false, so that it will not obscure the beauty of the truth in its expression through you. Then the intelligence, which is the predetermined knowing of the infinite, will express itself accordingly. There will be neither fear, envy, jealousy, hatred, antagonism, etc. to hinder it. Jesus identified himself with God. At the same time, he discerned the error that kept man in bondage. He identified himself with the ever-present, that is the immediate presence, for there can be no other. The presence of the future is but an idea in man's mind. Is it the something in the future that keeps your heart beating now? Neither is it your belief, nor your family tree, or your nationality, or any special organization. It is the ever-present presence that is living in you that keeps your heart beating. Identify yourself now with this now. The ever-present is always omnipresent, present everywhere. Have due regard for your family and all that makes up your individual life, and furnish you with companionship, but do not get your values confused. Steadfastly refuse to worship dignitaries or potentates. Do not become a slave to the dictates of others, neither to nationality, church, or family tree. Call no man your father on earth, for one is thy Father which is in heaven. The kingdom of heaven is within. In those words the whole of the invisible is open to us. Heaven is the unseen, that which is behind the scene. The one almighty mind unseen has brought into manifestation all that is seen. This is the mind in us, and our relationship to it is our union with God through our understanding that there can be no separation, that we are the true likeness of Him who created us in heaven in His own mind, where we become His delight, playing hither and thither in His presence, so we reverence Him with all our heart and mind. By doing so we express what we are aware of. He is the giver of all power and glory, and anything that we ask in His name shall be ours. What man is there of you, when if his son asks bread, will give him a stone, or if he asks a fish, will give him a serpent? If ye then, being ignorant, know how to give good things unto your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask? So mote it be. End of lesson. Chapter 15. If you are seeking love. In this communication, I want you to see what is happening around you. If you are unable to discern or become aware of what is taking place in your own minds and in the minds of others, you will be caught up in the net of the vicious circle in which the world is living. Now the state of affairs is the effect of your own thinking, with millions of others who are likewise caught up in the net. And while struggling to get out of it, you can only get further entangled in it because you never realize that the conditions are of your own making. The great majority of people do not think for themselves, for their thinking is caught up in imitation, security, power. The conception of progress is but a continual movement from one object to another. First of all, there is the craving to possess a material object, so there is striving until it is obtained. But the moment it is attained, it has lost its attraction, lost its significance. So craving goes on to the more subtle things such as popularity, fame, power, and the struggle goes on, but again there is disillusionment. And then there is a craving for truth, and that craving takes a more subtle turn again. Book after book is read in an endeavor to find peace and freedom. Throughout the whole world, everyone is seeking happiness, that happiness that endures, but such happiness is not to be found in imitation. Conformity with imitation begins with childhood, through education, society, and external circumstance. Thoughts and feelings are molded to correspond with public opinion, to religious ideas, to spiritual authority. If you consider any philosophy, religion, or system, you will find it is a method laid down for you to follow. All you do is to conform, to imitate, and forth your thinking into that particular mold of the philosophy, religion, or system, so you merely become cogs in a social or a religious machine. The whole structure of modern civilization is based entirely on conformity and adjustment to standards which have been laid down by an authority, the authority of public opinion or of a spiritual leader. This conformity results in the suffocation of individual thinking. The desire is to solve one's problem, and this is sought through a miracle. Through the centuries, a system of competition has been built up through selfishness. At the same time, innumerable authorities and teachers, gods, etc., have been set up for you to worship. You are taught to become lambs, but working for a living, you become like as many wolves. The remedy does not lie in setting up another system or the worshipping of another god outside oneself, but to go to the root of the whole problem. The present civilization is based upon greed and individual competition. It cannot last forever because it has no intrinsic value. The individual created the civilization which dominates him. The individual tries to express his ambition and attain his desired social position through the accumulation of wealth and power. The individual has set up social distinction, which results in ruthless competition in every way of life. This ruthless selfishness must eventually break down. It is merely a matter of time. As long as you have this conception of individuality, which is but selfishness, greed, no civilization, no structure built on it can last. The individual is the integral part of that civilization which the individual creates. Until now you have been spiritually a slave. You have followed, imitated, set up spiritual authorities, and tradition has bound the mind. In thought and emotion, the individual has merely conformed, while in the world of action, the individual has lived for himself, selfishly pursuing his own security. In order to supply the needs of existence, the individual must cooperate, work, and plan together. That is, we must get rid of the idea of nationality, flags, and frontiers. In this way, we will naturally solve the economic problem, because all will be working from a human point of view and not through separate national prejudices. When society is built on selfishness, on ruthless competition, when one fights another for his own security, and in the structure of the present civilization, the social order must eventually collapse. Man, through his possessive cravings, has built up what he calls civilization. To that world he clings, a structure based upon continual want, on the constant achievement of empty heights which must eventually crumble. What is the remedy? There is no world panacea, but you can individually and therefore collectively see the basic cause, and individually and therefore collectively step out of the system which is its inevitable product. In the world of action, man has become ruthless, aggressive in his desire for possession, in his search for security. He has used his mind to gratify his selfish craving. The individual must be able to think for himself, free from all imitation and tradition or public opinion, in thought and feeling. In this alone can there be true cooperation in the world of action for the benefit of all. We must find that which is eternal within ourselves, then and only then, when we work collectively based on human needs and not on human greed and exploitation. When the individual breaks down the narrowness of patriotism, nationality, flag-waving, and war, and as an individual ceases to exploit through selfish cleverness, there will come peace and understanding for which all are now groping in vain. Those who have been caught up in the net of race, thought, nationalities, creeds, politics, disease, ignorance, and death have permitted beliefs to rule them. They have lost their divine power of the presence that overcomes all things. Occasionally you see through all this struggle and catch a glimpse of something that gives you an ecstasy, and you seek to make it permanent by avoiding the conflict. You perceive this ecstasy in the distance while you are still surrounded by all your struggles, sorrows, pains, and pleasures. It seems far away, and you long to escape from all this turmoil to that ecstasy. Yet it is through discerning the cause and understanding this conflict that there is ecstasy of freedom and not an escape. Through the true discernment of the cause of the conflict is revealed the ecstasy of the presence. What applies to the individual applies to our civilization. You cannot separate one from the other, for they are one and the same. What is needed is clear thinking by the individual from cause to effect, not vain attempts to solve problems without understanding the fundamentals of human existence. If you hold on to your old mental habits of imitation, then there can be no real understanding. Your habits of thought must be studied, understood, and corrected. Not until thoughts become truly intelligent can you expect to see results that satisfy the human heart. You are all unconsciously and ignorantly pinning your faith to the power of things seen, remaining blind to the fact that these effects are but the result of your own action. Your minds have been built up and maintained under the influence of limited ideas derived from material things. But the only true foundation upon which to build the assurance of health and happiness is upon the presence that is eternal and ever-present, and not upon imitation and conformity, which is perpetuating the misery of your civilization. You do not free yourselves by acquiring comfort and consolation. You only live in an illusion if you want satisfaction in your desires. You must strip yourselves mentally naked, emptying your minds of inherited theories of right and wrong, what is spiritual and what is not spiritual. If you rely on compulsion, there can be no understanding. Through your fear, you adhere to tradition and become an imitator instead of a thinker. Likewise, with regard to physical things, the man who needs possessions for his happiness creates material exploitation. The exploiter does not come into being suddenly. He is not a freak of nature. He is the result of your demands, spiritual and economic, so you, the individual, are responsible. The individual has lost himself in a maze of ignorance, and you see the result in the chaotic conditions throughout the world. To find happiness, you must direct your creative forces intelligently in such a way that you remain the sole controller of your own thoughts and feelings, and not becoming a slave to tradition, public opinion, and authority of the less informed than yourself. Man's whole conception of life is based on selfishness with all its subtle ramifications, its illusions, its fear and consolations. Because man's action through fear is unconscious, it leads to irresponsibility and therefore to chaos. Wherever there is selfishness, there is lack of clear understanding. Conscious action through understanding and adjustment leads to pure action being that in which there is no longer selfishness, personality, but an understanding of the presence being never in opposition to itself at any time or in any individual. Good and evil are not entities. They are simply words which you use to indicate the result of your actions, and these actions are predetermined by the character of your thinking. Therefore, man is the root cause of good and evil. To guard against mental and physical chaos, you must not accept any opinion without due examination. Care must be taken to construct your thinking through understanding and true discernment. What you accept from others is so often constructed without due regard to fact. Every idea should be subjected to a searching analysis. You must not accept anything except it is scientifically exact. It is the Christ mind that is always conscious of the unlimited power and ability of the presence, at the same time understanding the limitation of the human mind. The highest possible gift man has is love. If you are seeking love, the only way to get it is to love more. Love is not possessive because love is the foundation of the universe. Possessiveness is craving, and this must be understood before it can be dissolved away. The presence is love, wisdom, and healing. It pours forth its mighty power to all. The only condition is our capacity to receive it. The whole world is looking for love that will set it free. Love is the expression of the divine nature that pours out through the entire universe, and everything must move around it. And because it is the center of the universe, it must also be the center of man, made in the image and likeness of God. In the sanctuary of the silent healing power, you all express that love, because you are realizing the presence which is love, wisdom, and healing. The blessing of the angel of light is upon your work of the sanctuary of the silent healing power. Benediction. Divine presence, unite our hearts with thine to rest in thee forever and ever. Teach us to hold ourselves as perfect in the mind of thy divinity. Let the flame of our love for thee soar triumphantly above the din of social problems and differing creeds. The light of thy love has swallowed up everything in one light. I see myself always one with thee. I pray that I may behold my love in others, and in the light of that great love may I behold thy unveiled face of peace. I behold myself in others, and I even perceive thee enthroned in our innermost hearts. O divine presence, unite our hearts as one heart, and on the sacred altar of united hearts we will find thine omnipresent enthroned forever. So mote it be. End of lesson. Chapter 16. Discern all that is false. In this lecture I wanted to give you some personal aid to your understanding based upon what I've already said. I have pointed out to you several times so as to make it clear to you that unless you discern the false, you will not understand the true. If you live in your limited state of mind, brought about by conformity and imitation through education, religion, philosophy, public opinion, and tradition, you will not escape by rebelling against the miseries you yourselves have created. You may seek an escape from the prison of your own making by accepting the idea that the divine nature can and will release you from your prison. Yet if you do not discern and discover the cause of your own miseries, you only bring the idea into your prison, and you are still bound by it. If you have a belief which you feel binds you in a prison of fear and limitation, and someone comes along with a similar belief which seems to you freedom, you are only enticed into their prison, so you are still bound. You are not thinking for yourself. You are only caught up in the net of belief that is similar to your own, that still separates you from your brothers and sisters. You are still imprisoned by your belief. The only way to be in harmony with your spiritual self is to discern all that is false around you, not merely denying these things, but understanding them. If they are not discerned and understood, they will cling around you and finally bring doubt of that very presence that could give you peace. Most people cling to the name of a disease, giving it an identity. By giving an identity, you are merely accepting another's opinion or belief, and you will observe, I hope, that this is not thinking nor understanding. It is not a name of a disease you need, but wisdom to discern the cause. Then you can drink the cup of life that is ever present. In the understanding of this, a new life begins for you now. The happiness of man is not increased by opinions founded by an ignorance and belief in theories of those who cannot heal the sick or relieve the troubled mind which is caught up in the net of emotion, imitation, and craving. Jesus cured the sick by giving the bread of life to the sick who had been deceived by others ignorant of the law. When man begins to think for himself, the truth will be revealed to him. The scales will fall from his eyes, and he will see how he has been deceived generation after generation. Jesus said, "Man is himself the field. His deeds are seeds, and what he does to others grows apace. The harvest is sure, and he must reap what he has sown. The fruit of peace and love can never spring from noxious weeds. The fruit is like its seed. Each one has problems to be solved. He must solve them for himself. How can you see the splinter in your own brother's eye while you have chunks within your own? And while your eyes are full of foreign things, you cannot see the way, for you are blind. And when the blind lead forth the blind, both lose the way and fall into the slough. If you would lead the way to God, you must be clear in sight as well as pure in heart. I am repeating these words of Jesus to show you that he did not merely give you an idea or a theory upon which he could rest, but made it exceedingly plain that you had to see that which was false, and that you must be clear in sight to see that way as well as pure in heart. Another statement made by him was, "There are no safety vaults on earth, no place secure from moth and rust and thieves. The treasures of earth are but elusive things and pass away. Be not deceived. Your treasures are the anchor of the soul, and where your treasures are, so your heart will be. The things that men see not with eyes of flesh are of more worth than are the things that man can see. This shows why craving causes misery and exploitation, and as the individual craves, so he is caught up in the net of craving, and is no longer able to think. His understanding has vanished like a piece of driftwood. He floats with the sea of humanity on a world in chaos. Again he said, "For as you judge, you shall be judged. If you condemn, you are condemned." Here we see the wisdom of Jesus in these few words. You must cleanse your mind of comparison. You are apt to compare yourself with those you think spiritual and upright. You refuse to align yourself with those whom you think are not your equal. This is the height of hypocrisy. Some look at the evil deeds of others and condemn them, while in their own mind these deeds have already been performed. Jesus said, "But lo, I say, that he who in his heart desires to possess that which is not his own, and would deprive the owner of the thing without his consent, is in the sight of God a thief." This shows how necessary it is that you should discern your own thoughts first before condemning others for their deeds, for deeds are but thoughts expressed. Perhaps you have never looked at it from this point of view, but I am endeavoring to make you aware of your own thoughts so that you can dissolve the rubble that hides the presence. Unless you can discern the false, you will not know the true. Most human beings are full of grave defects, and it is necessary to discern them, not merely denying them, for this does not help matters. To shrug your shoulders or cringe at the sight of your thought is no value. What is needed is to be quiet, and more quiet, to look at these influences as something not your real self, for your real self is the presence of the presence, and to abide in a quiet confidence in the divine power. If your soul asks for the divine, and your mind is sincere and calls for liberation from these influences, and by calling the presence into your own heart and relying upon it more than on your own strength, you will be able to end this siege and peace will take its place. You will break down the prison bars that hold you in the prison of your own making. The material world is the revelation of the creative power manifested through the mind. Visible things are the representation of the invisible. Both come from the same source. If you can comprehend this truth, you will rise above the effects that you see in your everyday life. And when you understand the conditions around you, you will no longer be afraid of them, but will meet them face to face, knowing them for what they are, false creations of man's mind through lack of wisdom. You will then know how to deal with them through the discerning of your own thoughts, craving, and emotion. Man, made in the image and likeness of God, lives in a material world in which he has been given dominion, a world so constituted that if he will use it intelligently, it will continually lift him to spiritual heights yet unknown. The realization of truth lies in your self-conscious completeness, sustained in the aloneness of your own integrity, free from conformity, public opinion, tradition, nationality, or creed. Through the flame of self-consciousness, you arrive at full responsibility in the recognition of this completeness, and this is true freedom. This is not an escape, nor is it a flight from condition around you. It is a gradual cessation of unconscious action through lack of discernment, which leads to misery. In this understanding is the beginning of true action, which will expand your consciousness and practical knowledge with your oneness and the creative source of all things, the presence. And as you acquire this knowledge through practice, you will, by the conscious use of the creative laws, have revealed to you a deeper significance than the mere intrinsic value of material possession. They will but represent to you the extent of your spiritual understanding and ability to cooperate with the Creator of all things. Material is but an idea in the mind, an idea of something of which you know little. But when you see that the material, the visible, and the invisible are one and the same thing, you will appreciate that in the invisible is the cause, and the material or visible is the effect. When you can see with your clear sight, freed from illusion, that you are one with the Creator of the universe, the present that is ever present in you will bring forth into being that which is acceptable to God. But if you fail to understand these things, you will create a series of causes and effects into which you will become enmeshed, and there can be no escape until the truth of what I have revealed to you fully dawns upon you. God himself has made it plain, for ever since the Word was created, his invisible nature, his everlasting power and divine being have been quite perceptible in what he has made. Romans 1:20. If you create error in yourself through lack of wisdom, you will externalize it. It has no power but the power you give it, and when you can discern this, you will begin to understand. Herein lies the secret of understanding the law of cause and effect. If you then set into operation the law of cause and effect, let it be pure action derived from pure thought. Then it will have a true foundation which is scientific and will lead to peace. But if set in operation by human emotion and limitation, it will lead to misery and chaos. Jesus said, "If you do unto other men as you do unto you, you are but slaves. But you, as children of the light, must lead the way. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you salute your friends and not your foes, you are like other men. Be ye perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." In other words, the presence is never antagonistic or in opposition to itself in any individual, and when this is seen, all are equally represented to the one who knows. When enmity is not created in oneself, there is freedom. But if enmity and separation are created in the mind, there can be no understanding, therefore no pure thought that leads to pure action. Your friends and others may call you all sorts of names without any thought of your welfare. But as God has named you, you remain permanently in his eternal mind just as he named you. Then act as such, for divine acting is the establishing of the law which is love, wisdom, and healing of the presence. The blessing of the angel of light is upon you and your work in the sanctuary of the silent healing power. Benediction. O fountain of love, make us feel that our hearts and our love for others are flooded with thy omnipresent love. Let the rivers of our desires and cravings pass through the lowlands of humbleness and self-sacrifice and consideration for others, and at last, reinforced from thy fountain of love, shall unite in the ocean of fulfillment in thee. Increase our affection and love for all so that we do not lose ourselves in that drought-stricken selfishness which is barren and waste. But let the lonely, separate streamlets of love coming from thee at last merge into the vastness of thy presence, revealing thy omnipresence of love, wisdom, and healing, for all to receive who will. My faith in thee has made me whole. So mote it be. End of lesson. Chapter 17. Happiness originates in the heart. Throughout the ages, spirit or life has revealed itself, embodied in its own creation as a guide to our understanding. This same spirit or life is calling to the inner life of embodied humanity that it is reared for its own habitation. The same or state is at hand when the embodied spirit self shall know and recognize its own inherent power, that its own life is the infinite life which manifests itself in an infinitude of forms in all worlds and spheres of being. This means that we are all irrefutably and eternally linked with the whole living universe. Those who showed the existence of this spiritual inheritance by their deeds and words have left a legacy to humanity. Although their works were seemingly beyond the capacity of the human understanding, they made it plain that they were not separate from humanity, nor did they make any claims beyond the inherited power within humanity. But as time has elapsed, the ideals or truth which they showed were common to all humanity, having been changed into idolatry. They have become the objects of worship whereby the truth of reality has been submerged in forms and formality, yet these instruments have left their footprints on the sands of time, and the truth that they revealed will spring forth again as mankind becomes more aware of this immanent life. The sayings of Krishna, Buddha, Brahma, Vishnu, Zoroaster, and Jesus lived through the ages and are still the fundamentals upon which humanity can continue to progress. Yet all the so-called systems in the world have been based upon the personality personified for the purpose of religion, which has separated the world into groups antagonistic to each other, making the acquisition of the knowledge of truth a question of competition and conflict. The time is fast approaching when this irreligious religion will disappear and the real will take its place. It will not seek to draw adherents to itself by any claim of special divine authority. Neither will it be associated with caste or class that perpetuates personal vested interest, but will be brought about by the involution of the life flow that is inherent in humanity as a whole, as it is inherent in the cosmos as one whole. This process will begin in a few, and will spread gradually to the whole of humanity, uplifting them to higher levels of thought and action. Inspiration is not confined to the few. It is an inherent quality of the spirit of mankind. It is the eternal link, uniting the inexhaustible source of life to its offspring. And through this link, the transmission of thought process from the higher to the lower can be opened up by any who desire to be recipients. We recognize that nearly 2,000 years ago, the source of transcendent transmission was seen expressed through one who proclaimed the same truth that we know now to be the only way to freedom. This is not only to be preached, but be translated into daily living. Although tremendous progress has been effected in the material, scientific, and industrial fields, the religious systems are not meeting the requirements of modern thinkers. The world is calling for a new spiritual lead, a new inspiration conveying both explanatory information with regard to the spiritual universe and our relation to it. When mankind comes to realize that the infinite self is permanently meditating its own life process to us, thereby demonstrating that we are held by it in permanent, inseparable connection, mankind need dispense with a root that is being expressed on every side, causing fear and confusion in the minds of people, which cause separation and distrust in one another. Such religion has become the ridicule of the enlightened mind. If we are all part of God, we are all one family. The history of man contains much slavery, brutality, and injustice. Someone a little stronger, a little more clever than the rest enslaves his fellow for his own selfish ends. Man in the past has been the sport of kings and priests. Through fear and starvation he was forced to cringe at the foot of the tyrant, and through fear of the unknown he is bound to the authority of his religious belief, to which he was forced to conform. However, education is gradually making mankind realize that he is not here to be downtrodden. Understanding gives all the opportunity of becoming equal, and those with finer minds will always take the lead. It is quite evident to those who think and can see the writing on the wall. Since the beginning of history, a small minority of an individual has kept the nation in ignorance and servitude or driven it to war. The reason, of course, is that the unthinking individuals are like sheep. They only know enough to get a bare existence, and through fear they conform to what others think and direct. Only when man combines his reason with his labor can he advance. The ignorance among the masses is still pitiful, but as man develops his mind through clear thinking, so will he free himself from his past miseries and raise himself to self-respect and independence through understanding the cause of his miseries and the realization of what he is in reality. Robert Burns, in his immortal ballad, "For a that and a that," wrote, "Then let us pray that come it may, as come it will, for a that sins and worth o'er the earth may bear the gree and a that, for a that and a that man to man the world over shall bother for be a that." We see also in the Scriptures the identical thing expressed by Peter at Caserna. "Of a truth I perceive that God is no respecter of persons," and where Jesus says in St. John, "And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. These also I must bring, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd." Let each one of us, where possible, rescue the ignorant and help the helpless. Let us distribute words of kindness, cheerfulness, and encouragement. By doing all the good we can, by binding up the wounds of our fellows, we are bringing near and near the great day when the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God shall become a reality and not a platitude. To do all the good we can is to be religious in the real sense of the word, and to do all the good we can is to be a saint, irrespective of religious belief. To put the star of hope in the midnight of despair, to help those in need of help, and help those who suffer as true holiness. This is the religion of the future. That is what the sanctuary of the silent healing power stands for, and that is what is meant by the brotherhood of man. Happiness originates in the heart, and not from anything outside oneself. If I may quote Burns again on the vanity of possession, he says, "It's no in the title nor in the rank. It's no in wealth, like London Bank, to purchase peace and rest. It's no in making muckle fare, it's no in boots, it's no in lear, to make us truly blessed. If happiness have not her seat and centre in her breast, we may be wise or rich or great, but never can be blessed. Nay, treasures or pleasures could make us happy lang, the heart a's the part that makes us right or wrang." We read also in the Scripture of Ecclesiastics, "I made me great works, I builded me houses, I planted me vineyards, I gathered me also silver and gold, and the peculiar treasures of kings in the provinces. And whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. Then I looked on all the works that in my hands had wrought, and on the labors that I had labored to do. And behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. Just as we come to realize that this world is the preparatory school for our spiritual existence, so shall we cease to grab all for ourselves and work instead for the common good. When we are prepared to give to all what we claim for ourselves, then shall we be truly civilized, and the world will be a fit place to live in. Today, every nation and every individual thinks only of their own needs first, with the result that poverty and misery are rampant all over the world. My dear friends, this must not be and cannot last long. The sands of time are running out. Enormous sums are spent on the science of destruction to wipe humanity off the face of the earth, all on the pretext of self-preservation, thus promoting suspicion at home and abroad. The hour has come for the call to go out to civilization, to disregard leaders bound in ignorance, both in the church and in the nation, and adhere to the one ever-present presence that is never antagonistic, or in opposition to itself in any nation or individual. So every one of you must do your part to enlighten others, so as ye do unto others, so ye do unto me. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Here is the call to the disciple to use his wisdom and power in the direction of remedying the strife that arise from the different conceptions of God and truth prevailing in the world. Those who are able to point out the truth, underline all religions and beliefs, indeed become the beloved sons and daughters of God. To be able to show that under all forms and ceremonies, under various titles and names, beyond various creeds and dogmas, there is but one God, whom all worship, assuredly he or she is a peacemaker and a son and daughter of God. We also read of the Buddha in the sermon at Benares. Neither abstinence from fish or flesh, not going naked, nor shaving your head, not wearing matted hair or dressing in rough garments, nor covering oneself with dirt, nor sacrificing to Agni, will cleanse a man who is not free from delusion. Reading the Vedas, making offerings to priest or sacrifice to the god, self-mortification by heat or cold, and much penance performed for the sake of immortality does not cleanse the man from delusion. In the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5:17-18, Think not that I come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. In this passage, Jesus asserted positively the fact that he was carrying out the work of those who preceded him. While Moses was the first great prophet, Jesus was he that would come after. While Moses revealed the universal Spirit of God, Jesus revealed this universal Spirit in mankind individualized, and that this was a central point in man himself, and from this all must proceed outwardly, and to know it was man's salvation. He told him of the law written in the hearts of man, which had always existed, and would so continue, and not one jot or one tittle would in no wise pass away from the law till all things were accomplished. That which God had ordained would be fulfilled, and the way of this fulfilling has shown by him in all his sayings and doings, which I have so often told you about. He informed his own people, the Jews, that he did not come to destroy the law of Moses, but to fulfill the greater part of it, to unite the world in one family of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. This teaching was the inner teaching, not the outer religious creed and dogma. He came, therefore, not to destroy, but to fulfill, and when one reads the Old Testament, there it distinctly states, The Lord God is one Lord, and he created man in his own image and likeness. Matthew 7:1-5, Judge not, that ye not be judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged, and with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you again. And why beholdest thou the mote in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thy own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, Let me pull out the mote of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thy own? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam of thy own eye, and thou shalt see clearly to cast out the mote of thy brother's eye. Here Jesus deals another blow to the self-righteous of all sects, creeds, and cults of the land, time and religion. He means those that thank God, I am holier than thou attitude, that so many vain formalists affect in their dealing with others. To be spiritual is not indicated by whether a man wears a gown or tinsel braid, or whether he be a priest, cardinal, or bishop. Being spiritual means wholeness, completeness, not separation. I am holier than now. I am different. That was more than Jesus said of himself. So these immortal words of Jesus have sounded through the ages as a scathing rebuke to the hypocritical judges of other men, these people who wish to reform, others to conform to their standards. Thou hypocrites, cast out first the beam of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. Out of the mouth of their master are many so-called followers rebuked. What comforts most to those who understand in the same life in Jesus and the other prophets is in you and me. And to identify ourselves with this life is to be truly of service to all. To get this feeling of oneness is to believe no more but to see and feel instead. This is truly the science of living which brings the greatest rewards. In this way you increase your value in the sanctuary of the silent healing power. The blessing of the angel of light is upon your work of the sanctuary of the silent healing power. Benediction. O lovely one, thy balm is in thy breath of thy creation. The stricken have heard of thy healing power, and have come to thy door to find it ajar. Printed in thy lettering of love they saw enter in those whose hearts are breaking with despair and sadness. Thy invisible hand has dried away their scalding tears. Those who are lost in illusion, to whom shall they turn but to thee? And with the advent of the dawn of thy presence their dark troubles will take wings. We rejoice in thy quiet voice, ever singing in thy souls, Tell me, wilt thou be mine? Whatever is mine, that also is thine. So mote it be. End of lesson. End of book. This audio presentation of your silent partner, Cosmic Consciousness, Part 2, by Murdo MacDonald Bayne, has been brought to you by AudioEnlightenment.com and has been recorded for the exclusive use of Audio Enlightenment members only. If you've received this audio from any website other than our own, please visit our website. Let us know at your convenience.